Chapter 1509. The Xuanwu army surged forward like a tidal wave, and the sound of armor colliding rang out like muffled thunder rolling on the ground. In the sky, all the true disciples followed along, their hearts filled with hope. How could the demon folk stop such an army and such a military god? Dai Mengfan's brows furrowed with a hint of worry, and she said seriously, "Fellow Taoists, the war is dangerous. Please be careful." Casin smiled. "You're worrying too much, senior sister. In my opinion, although there are many demon folk, they lack a talented commander like junior brother Li who can rally the morale of the army. Even if they have a military formation, it's just a formality. The morale of the army can't be condensed into a god of war. With this black tortoise military god, how hard would it be to break the 12 citadel demon formation of the evil?" The demon folk possessed an army of several million, spanning hundreds of kilometers. However, neither Tu Wanqing nor any of the demon kings possessed the strength and prestige to command an army of several million. Even gathering military qi was an issue, let alone condensing a war god. Dai Mengfan nodded. "Junior sister has never been to the battlefield. It's not bad that you have such knowledge. However," Le Tien suddenly interrupted, "we're about to enter the demon's domain, senior sister, there's no need to say any more. Some things, can only be understood after experiencing it." The owner of the Spiritual Treasures Tower, Lu Bombing, silently took out an exquisite small boat from his sleeve and threw it into the air. It expanded with the wind, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into a giant steel ship that was thousands of feet long. He jumped into it. Casin pouted. "Sixth senior brother is too timid. Third senior sister's words are reasonable. How can I not listen?" Lu Bombing smiled and said, "This 7 treasures exquisite boat is my mount. I don't have many opportunities to use it, so now it's just the right time to fight." The giant spirit divine armor he gave to Li Qingshan was already considered a rare item, but compared to this 7 treasures exquisite ship, it was nothing. This was an imitation of the immortal warship that heavenly soldiers and generals rode above the 9 heavens. From the design to the construction, a lot of effort and resources had been spent. Not only was it incredibly powerful, but it was also indestructible. Even if the 12 demon monarchs attacked it together, it would not be able to withstand it. He was not afraid either. He believed that in this war, he would be the safest one. Coupled with the great destructive power of the 7 treasures exquisite ship, he would definitely be able to slaughter many demon folk and make a name for himself. As a result, his ranking on the list of 10,000 phenomenon rose a few ranks. As for the giant spirit divine armor, the sect would naturally compensate him after the victory. Perhaps it could even be counted as a battle merit. Apart from Ruan Yaozhu, who had a slightly reluctant look on her face, the true disciples were all gearing up for battle and took out their trump cards. He was ready to start a massacre. Dai Mengfan frowned slightly and did not say anything else. Which true disciple wasn't a peerless genius with extraordinary talent? All of them had their own pride, so it was useless to say anything more. They would understand very soon that demon folk were not that easy to deal with. Yingzhe looked at the approaching black tortoise god of war and the flames on his flanks. He didn't show the slightest fear. Instead, he sneered and said, "Black Cloud City has been breached. Tu Wanqing, are you ready?" Boom. The 12th totem pillar pierced through the clouds, and a lifelike image of a demon god emerged from it. It seemed like a human, yet not a human, like a beast, yet not a beast. It had a single, huge eye, and 2 boar-like teeth protruded from its gaping mouth. It gave off a vicious aura. The ground shook gently. The 12 totem pillars seemed to form another world. Resplendent demonic light wove together, forming a strange scene that condensed into the core of the formation. The 12 citadel demon formation of the ominous was complete. Tu Wanqing climbed onto the totem pillar and smiled viciously. "I've been waiting a long time ago." The 12 citadel demon formation of the ominous had been activated. The lifelike image of the demon god suddenly blinked and began to move. Yingzhe, who had only lowered his head when the demons descended, suddenly knelt down. Yingzhe, who had only lowered his head when the demons descended, suddenly knelt down. Just like the shaman priests, he touched his forehead to the ground and raised his hands. "Welcome, demon god Bayan." The other demon emperors knelt down on the totem pillars as well and called out, "Welcome, demon god Bayan." The will of the demon domain was in chaos. At the level of demon emperors, there was no longer much reverence. But if they accidentally offended demon god Bayan, only death awaited them. That demon god was famous for his arrogance and ruthlessness. Of course, this was not the true descent of a demon god. It was just an incarnation formed by the 12 citadel demon formation of evil. It did not have a trace of consciousness, and only its evil spirit was present. But this battle was related to the legendary Black Sun descent. No one could be sure if demon god Bayan's consciousness would descend. Demon god Bayan charged out of the totem pillar, and its single eye widened. It saw the approaching Black Tortoise military god. The Black Tortoise military god also looked over coldly. Its arrogant and vicious spirit was instantly enraged. It opened its gaping mouth and roared fiercely. Waves of air that could be seen with the naked eye surged out. The Black Tortoise military god's advance paused slightly, and it also roared furiously. A deafening boom resounded. Cassin felt as if a wooden stake had been thrown into her ear. Her expression changed drastically, and she hurriedly circulated her magic power to block. By now, the true disciples had already crossed the border with the Black Tortoise military god, entering the demon domain. Although they would be suppressed by the laws of the demon domain, they had still recovered their cultivation as human emperors. Against the incarnation of demon god Bayan, they actually felt like they were struggling to fend it off. Having taken them down a notch, they no longer dared to be careless. Cassin bit her lip gently. "Senior sister, you're right. If it weren't for the Black Tortoise military god, we probably wouldn't be able to get through the 12 citadel demon formation of evil even if we attacked together." Before Dai Mengfan could say anything, Letian said, "Don't panic, junior sister. We're only just getting there." His eyes squinted into a line, but he no longer had his usual calm smile of having everything under control. He fiddled around with the 2 dice in his right hand. It was as if he wanted to peer into the heavenly secrets and divine the outcome of this gamble, or even life and death. A demon folk shaman, Zhu Ang, raised his head and called out madly, "It's a demon god. A demon god has descended." The camp of demon folk erupted. Millions of demon folk gazed at the demon god Bayan with bloodshot eyes, filled with zealous admiration. It was the complete opposite of the demon king's cautious attitude. The 12 demon gods were the targets of worship for all demon folk. They were the supreme existences in their hearts. They called out the demon god's name, Bayan, Bayan, Bayan. This word did not seem like a title, but the most evil of curses. It possessed terrifying power in its own right. The cries of the several 100,000 people in the Black Tortoise army were already like a tsunami. Now that millions of people were calling out together, it was like the world was collapsing. Dai Mengfan closed her eyes, but the nightmares of the past were all revived, swaying before her eyes. The expressions of all the true disciples changed. They could sense that something terrifying was about to happen. Li Qingshan frowned, but he did not stop. He faced the gaze from the Bayan demon god's single eye and continued onwards. Yingzhe said, "God, please possess me." The demon kings all said, "God, please possess me." The Bayan demon god descended from above, landing on Tu Wancheng. In that moment, a military aura surged towards him like the clouds and the sea. The Bayan demon god swelled up rapidly, surging past the Black Tortoise war god in the blink of an eye and directly standing shoulder to shoulder with Black Cloud City in the distance. No, to it, Black Cloud City was already within reach. It crouched down slightly and blocked out the sunlight, casting a huge shadow over it. Cassin's eyes were dazed. She murmured, "What is that?" Chapter 15:10. Li Qingshan suddenly stiffened up, like a frog that had encountered a snake. He could not help but tremble slightly. A sense of terror rose up involuntarily, as if he was facing a natural enemy. Even though he was already mentally prepared, he still found the monster that had appeared before him unbelievable. In comparison, Cheongchi's clone in the past was powerful, but it was still restricted by the laws of the world of the 9 provinces. Just now, the demonic sky was terrifying, but it was chaotic and twisted after all. It lacked self-awareness. However, not only did the Taowu demon god's strength completely exceed the human emperor and demon emperor, but it even exceeded regular human immortals and evil gods. It was like a demon god had arrived in person, and it was filled with hostility. Wn Jianfeng's hand trembled, and he suddenly gripped the hilt of his sword. How can my sword cut through something like that? Dai Mengfan opened her eyes. The nightmare had come true, and it was even more terrifying than ever before. It was as if she had returned to her childhood, turning back into the little girl who was afraid of the wind and shadows. She sighed with a bitter smile. That's why I hate war. On the other side of the battlefield, Hua Hua gazed at the colossal figure that connected the sky and said to Li Liehua very seriously, "Let's just flee to the demonic beast realm." Li Liehua remained silent. He did not reply. The air on the battlefield seemed to freeze, turning into twisted vortexes that dragged everyone into the abyss. The moment Taowu appeared, before it had even struck, it had deterred everyone. Normally, Tu Wanqing would have burst out laughing already, but right now, an even more powerful spirit pierced through his mind. It was proud, vicious, and forceful. It was also this spirit that pierced through the entire battlefield. Taowu twisted its neck and opened its gaping mouth. Its great, hard voice rang through the surroundings. The world is heartless, and all life is worthless. Millions of demon folk called out together, "The world is heartless, and all life is worthless." They were filled with resentment and fury, cursing the heartless world. Taowu's existence immediately became even more consolidated, and its body stretched out even more. Its huge single eye swiveled around, and its gaze swept across the battlefield like a pillar of light. Every single person, whether it be the regular soldiers or true disciples, they all sank even deeper into the swamp of fear. Taowu said again, "The saints are heartless, and all life is worthless." Looking down from above, humans were indeed as insignificant as ants. They crawled on the ground densely, so fragile and so fleeting. The saints are heartless, and all living beings are ants. Millions of demon folk howled. They were willing to treat themselves as lowly ants. He was not afraid of death. A frenzied aura instantly overwhelmed the Xuanwu army. Why would people with the will to live step onto such a tragic battlefield? With just 2 sentences and 16 words, Bian had turned the situation around. All the efforts that Li Qingshan and the others had put in from the beginning to the end seemed to be a joke. What perseverance and determination! What equality! In the face of absolute power, what meaning was there? I called you an ant. You are an ant, even if you aren't. In the end, Bian stared at the black tortoise god of war. His gaze seemed to pierce through the layers of military aura and see Li Qingshan. I'm heartless too. These words, which did not contain any power, were like a huge wooden stick stabbing into his chest. A pure and unyielding spirit seemed to be able to suppress everything. Boom! The black tortoise god of war twisted and blurred for a moment, and its military aura showed signs of dissipating. Oh no! Li Qingshan was alarmed. The situation was already extremely bad. He was supported by the tremendous military aura, yet he still endured such great pressure, let alone the true disciples. Even the regular soldiers. They all stared at the shadow above them blankly. They could not even see Bian in its entirety. Even the bravest of warriors shivered inside. If they had not formed a military formation and united will, Bian could have driven these hundreds of thousands of people into a frenzy with his spirit alone. Li Qingshan knew that if this continued, the morale of the army would collapse very soon. The entire army would collapse. Several 100,000 soldiers would be at the mercy of the enemy, and the enemy had not even truly done anything yet. Faced with such dire straits, if it were someone else, they probably would have considered retreating already. However, the suppression instead roused his stubbornness, making him rise up with an even greater will to fight. His chest heaved several times as he bellowed out, "Advance!" The black tortoise god of war advanced, charging at the demon folk army alone just like Li Qingshan. He swung his blade at Bian. His voice was like thunder, and his blade was like lightning, ripping apart the terrifying shadow cast by Bian. The morale of the army trembled as they looked at Li Qingshan, at their war god. The slash roused Tu Wanqing from his sweet dream. He returned to his senses from the powerful spirit of the Bayan demon god. He was both surprised and furious. Bayan extended his hand and grabbed the blade. There was a hint of disbelief in his tough, furious voice. "You actually dare to challenge a war god?" "Challenge?" Li Qingshan smiled. "No, I'm going to kill you." "Ha, just you?" Tu Wancheng laughed from extreme anger. Bayan's other arm shot through the air like a black dragon, reaching towards the black tortoise god of war's head with a huge, black hand. With a thump, the space there trembled. The black tortoise god of war's punch landed in the center of the huge hand. Who knew how deep his feet sank into the ground? Their physiques were like that of a child and a brawny man, but it was a contest of strength. Li Qingshan gritted his teeth. "I'm not alone," he roared, "advance." Unknowingly, the army's morale that was on the verge of collapsing solidified again. The general was the courage of the army. The soldiers woke up from their terror and murmured, "General." Tu Wancheng said viciously, "I'll grind you into dust." Bayan suddenly looked down, a demonic light shot out from its single eye and shrouded the black tortoise god of war. The black tortoise god of war burned in the demonic light, its golden armor dimmed and its cloak became tattered, turning into ashes inch by inch. His towering body was fiercely suppressed without the slightest bit of resistance. The soil behind his feet bulged up, forming two small hills, but he still didn't take a single step back. Hua was dumbfounded. "This kid is crazy." Under the gaze of Bayan, once the black tortoise god of war collapsed, anyone could escape. Only Li Qingshan would definitely die. However, Li Liehua began to laugh. He laughed extremely happily and gave an order. At the same time, Li Qingshan's desperate roars rang out from afar. "Advance!" The commandants of the 5 armies shuddered inside. He asked loudly, "Have you all forgotten the oath you swore last night?" "We will never forget. We're willing to fight to the death with the general. The general has given his orders. Advance! 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 Advance!" Their ordinary faces actually shone with a light similar to Buddhism's enlightenment. They were fearless, as if they were facing death with equanimity. The war drums shook the sky, but the entire army fell silent instead. Only the clanging of armor against each other was filled with the determination to die. Following in Li Qingshan's footsteps, they advanced towards the unbelievably colossal Bayan, towards the army that occupied millions of demon folk. Chapter 15:11. Let's assist junior brother Li. Dai Mengfan said firmly, "Let's kill this monster." Originally, the best choice was to bypass the Bayan condensed from military chi and directly sweep through the regular demon folk. However, without assistance, the black tortoise war god would not be able to last at all. She tossed out a half-transparent scarf, which swelled in the wind and blotted out the sun in the blink of an eye. Clouds surged within it, as resplendent as the clouds of fire, enveloping the Bayan's head. The scarlet scarf of fire was an arcane treasure personally bestowed by the sect master. It could envelop a range of 3,000 meters and possessed tremendous power. Once enveloped, even demon kings could forget about escaping. Swish! Wn Jianfeng twisted the hilt of his sword, and a streak of light tore through the air, cutting towards the Bayan's huge eye first. The ship of 7 treasures thrummed and shook, firing its cannons at full strength. With the sound of metal rubbing and swelling, the bow of the ship opened up completely, forming a huge main cannon that was speckled with specks of light. All of the true disciples struck out with their full strength, unleashing the techniques they were the proudest of their lives and the most powerful arcane treasures they had ever used against the Bayan. Lu Bombing said firmly, "Fire!" The ship of 7 treasures suddenly shot out with 1,000 streaks of light. The main cannon at the bow unleashed a blue pillar of light, striking the Bayan's chest heavily. At that moment, dazzling light crisscrossed in the sky. The light shattered and dispersed, swallowing the Bayan's colossal body. It tilted backwards slightly, releasing the black tortoise war god. Li Qingshan had just caught his breath, but he did not relax at all. An even greater sense of danger surged over. This still isn't enough. It's nowhere near enough. Lu Bombing stood before the porthole and gazed at this rare, magnificent sight. He thought, an attack like this can even flatten a mountain. Just how many rounds of attacks can this fake Bayan endure? Just now, it's been suppressed by the demon god's mental pressure. This is the perfect opportunity for my ship of 7 treasures to perform. Such a glorious attack basically filled all of the true disciples with confidence, as if they could see the dawn of victory. At this moment, a die in Letien's hand shattered, and a layer of frost rapidly covered his temples. His eyes suddenly widened. This is a dead end. With a ripping sound, the fiery cloud scarlet cloth was torn to shreds. All the magic treasures were sent flying and even directly destroyed. A giant black palm suddenly reached out from the layers of light. He grabbed the 7 treasures' exquisite ship in midair. Before Lu Bombing could react, the porthole was shrouded in darkness. With a bang, it cracked and shattered. The hull of the ship let out a cracking sound as it rapidly compressed inward. Boom! The indestructible 7 treasures' exquisite ship was crushed by Swanee. Thrown on the ground like rags. Lu Bombing broke through the distorted hull of the ship. He was bathed in blood and his bones were exposed. His body was on the verge of collapse. Dai Mengfan exclaimed, "Junior Marshal Brother Lu, be careful." That terrifying shadow loomed over him again. Lu Bombing raised his head and looked up. Darkness filled his vision, and it took him a lot of effort to make out that it was the shape of a foot. No, boom! The giant foot stomped down, causing the earth to shake. The debris of the 7 treasures' exquisite boat scattered, and Lu Bombing's aura disappeared. Even his young spirit did not escape. With just a claw and a stomp, Lu Bombing, the owner of the Spirit Treasures Tower, died. The true disciples were all stunned. They could not believe what had happened in front of them. A dignified human emperor had died so easily. The light danced, and the smoke and dust dissipated. Swanee was almost unscathed. Tu Wancheng laughed wildly, "Bugs. You're all bugs." A dark red beam of light shot out of Swanee's huge eye. It was 10 times thicker than the beam of the main cannon on the bow of the 7 treasures' exquisite boat just now. It pierced through the void and swept across. Almost all the true disciples were hit. All kinds of protective spells were shattered, and only protective magic treasures could withstand it. They were also sent flying by the fierce impact. Only a brawny true disciple riding on a giant bear raised a dark and heavy solemn shield high and blocked the impact of the light just like that. Dai Mengfan warned, "Junior Marshal Brother Bear, don't be stubborn." However, it was too late. Swanee's eyes narrowed, and the dark red beam of light suddenly condensed to the thickness of a bucket, instantly piercing through the shield. The true disciple slowly lowered his head. A huge hole had appeared in his chest. Even his young spirit had been pierced. The giant bear beneath him had just let out a sorrowful wail when the beam of light swept downwards, splitting it in half. The human and bear corpses fell from the sky together. A second true disciple had died, along with a demon emperor mount. 3 powerful existences who had undergone 5 heavenly tribulations had been slaughtered like pigs and dogs. The true disciples felt like they were about to lose their minds, or perhaps they had already lost their minds. All of their hopes for luck had been shattered. The brutality of the war had far exceeded their imaginations. This was not a battle of magical abilities. There were various life-saving techniques that could be used. At the very worst, they could even summon their young spirits. This was war. No one was absolutely safe. Even human emperors could be killed easily. Just now, Swanee's gaze was fixed on any one of them. None of them could say for sure that they could survive. Great terror gripped everyone. At this moment, there was a flash of golden light. Swanee lowered its head, only to see the black tortoise war god stab its huge blade into its abdomen. Blade chi immediately erupted, and the 2 military chi collided violently. With the deafening sound of war drums, the black tortoise army charged into the demonfolk camp. The demonfolk organized an army to receive them. In stark contrast to the silence of the human soldiers, the demonfolk roared out madly. Their battle cries shook up the surroundings as they charged. The wind whistled, rapidly drawing closer. Bang! 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 On the undulating earth, a torrent of steel collided with each other. Their hands rose and fell. Spears formed a forest, and arrows pierced through the air. The cold blades harvested flesh and blood madly. Blood dyed the ground red very soon. A long line of blood rapidly expanded. Every single line was a hunting ground for the war beasts. Not a single person retreated. Whether it be the frenzied demonfolk or the silent humans, they stabbed their weapons into the enemy as hard as they could before being killed by the enemies behind them. The demonfolk numbered in the millions. They possessed absolute numbers, and they were abnormally insane. They basically charged towards the Black Tortoise army like they were seeking death. However, the Black Tortoise army's battle prowess was even greater. 5 people formed a group, with the sergeant leading the charge. 10 people formed a group, with the sergeant leading the charge. 100 people formed a group, with the sergeant leading the charge. Under the command of the commandant, the officer, and the brigade commander, they constantly advanced with the resolve to die. A shadow flickered in their hearts. The torrents of steel advanced unstoppably, slaughtering and devouring all demonfolk they encountered. They were constantly whittled away as well. Someone died in battle every single moment. There was no objective, no limit. There was only a single belief. A furious roar, advance. In this frenzied slaughter, the military chi blazed like fire. Not only did it not weaken because of the large numbers of deaths, but the Black Tortoise war god even swelled up. Its tattered cloak surged violently as it stabbed its huge blade even deeper with its full strength. A huge, black hand fell down and grabbed the Black Tortoise war god's head. Swanee had become even larger than just now. An ant trying to shake a tree. It's pointless. The Black Tortoise war god's helmet twisted and collapsed under the huge hand, revealing a cold face similar to Li Qingshan's. The thundering of hooves rang out. Flames surged into the sky in the distance. An army of thousands galloped over. A fiery rider rode over on a fine horse. Chapter 15:12. The flames surged into the sky, the majesty of the god of war. It was impossible for such a large-scale military movement to fool the demon kings. Armies of demonfolk had been lined up and waiting for them a long time ago. The cavalry surged and the ground shook. Even the craziest demonfolk showed a hint of shock. With a buzz, tens of thousands of crossbow mechanisms rang out at the same time. The sky lit up, and a cloud of fire rose into the air. That was a continuous barrage of fire arrows, directly lunging into the demonfolk army. Countless demonfolk cried out and collapsed. The armored cavalry arrived afterwards. The military god of fire took the lead, brandishing his spear of fire. With a gentle sweep, thousands of demonfolk were reduced to ashes. Even the demon emperor leading the army was burned to death. Suddenly, a glimmer of hope rose in the hearts of the true disciples. If the 2 army gods joined forces to fight against Dao Wu, they might stand a chance. However, Li Liehua had no intentions of coming over. 100,000 cavalrymen surged forward, charging through the demonfolk camp. The scorching war god charged straight for the 12 citadel demon formation of the ominous. Li Qingshan nodded inside. This was the best choice, as well as the only choice. The war god could not be too far away from the military formation. There were several dozen kilometers between them, and the terrain was uneven too. It seemed like the war god of fire could arrive with a flick of his horse, but the regular soldiers wore helmets and armor and were blocked by demonfolk, so how could they possibly charge over in a short amount of time? Furthermore, even if the 2 of them joined forces, they might not be a match for the Swanee. Only by breaking the 12 citadel demon fiend formation would they be able to win. That was the greatest use of Li Liehua's surprise troops. Tu Wancheng sneered, just because of this. Bayan suddenly crushed the Black Tortoise god of war's head, and clouds of scattered military energy seeped out from between his fingers. The Black Tortoise army god's chest rumbled as if he was roaring. Even though he had lost his head, he still stepped forward and stabbed the giant blade into the ground. Then, he spun the hilt with all his might, stirring the Bayan's abdomen into a mass of chaotic military energy. The sky turned dark. It was like he had returned to the savage battlefield, where gods and demons fought. Dai Mengfan ordered the true disciples to continue attacking. However, she saw that they were all busy casting protective spells. Only a few listened to her orders and continued to attack Dao Wu, but they could not pose any threat. Within the 12 citadel demon fiend formation, Yingzhe smiled. Human cultivators are all cowards after all. They're even worse than mortals. A demon emperor said with lingering fear, if they are as reckless as these mortals, then this battle will be troublesome. The Xuanwu army continued to charge forward silently. The torrent of steel faced no obstruction, whether it was demonfolk or military formations. It was still fear and death. The firelight in the distance was getting closer and closer. At first glance, the fierce raging inferno military god seemed to be right in front of them. Murderous chi, vicious chi, resolute chi, battle intent, rage intent, madness intent. Wave after wave surged up into the sky, and a trace of blood red could be seen in the sky. Yingzhe ordered, Tu Wanqing, stop wasting time and end the battle quickly. Shut up. Laro Ari suddenly turned around and said stiffly, I don't need your command. Yingzhe closed his eyes and thought, if I lose this battle, you know what will happen to you. In his heart, he thought fiercely, what a dog who uses the tiger's might to intimidate others. I'll teach you a lesson later. Laro Ari turned around and looked at the headless Xuanwu military god. His gaze pierced through the surging military chi in the neck and stared at Li Qingshan. Die. He was not stupid enough to waste his military chi against the Xuanwu military god. That was a privilege only granted to opponents of equal strength. He clenched his huge, black hand and poured all of his strength into it. Black waves surged out as he punched through the Xuanwu military god's chest. The golden armor shattered immediately. Li Qingshan could vaguely see a great swath of darkness attacking him. It was as if the shadow of death had enveloped him. It was too fast. Even though he knew how the opponent would attack him, he was still unable to react in time, let alone dodge the punch. Under the terrifying mental pressure of Laro Ari, even his thoughts became sluggish. Absolute power. Absolute speed, absolute spirit. When the three were combined, even a regular strike could destroy a human emperor. There was no need for any extra techniques. All Li Qingshan could do was use his surging military chi to slightly obstruct the punch. He performed the bull demon forges its hide, and his skin turned blue. The next moment, he felt a sharp pain all over his body. His bones cracked as if he had been hit by a mountain. With a bang, Li Qingshan flew out from the Xuanwu military god's back and flew far away to Black Cloud City. Boom! Boom! He crashed through 3 towers in a row and smashed into a drill ground. The whole drill ground suddenly collapsed, creating a big hole that led straight to a cave in the mountain. Li Qingshan's figure disappeared in the cave, and it was unknown whether he was dead or alive. The tower collapsed with a loud bang. Qingshan! Ruan Yarozhu exclaimed, but she did not dare to check. No matter how stupid she was, she could see that if she retreated now, it would cause an avalanche. After having its head crushed, the colossal black tortoise war god's chest was pierced in a single strike, sending Li Qingshan flying. Its military aura rapidly dispersed, and it no longer possessed any battle prowess. The true disciples were forced to face the terrifying Tao Wu alone. Dai Mengfan gritted his teeth painfully. They were probably going to lose this battle. Who knew how many true disciples would be able to escape, but 1,000,000 soldiers, the scorching fire and Xuanwu armies, would all be buried here. This is the fate of opposing demon gods. Tu Wanqing laughed madly. Laro Ari opened his huge mouth and let out a forceful laugh. He was extremely confident in the power of the punch. It probably even killed his young spirit. There was no possibility of him escaping. As for the remaining so-called Xuanwu army, he could stomp several thousand to death with a single stomp, and he could even jolt several tens of thousands to death. However, these ants were not worth killing at all. They were only bold enough to advance because they had been encouraged and tricked. Now that their commander had died in battle, they would collapse very soon. They could be left for the regular demon folk to slaughter. As a result, Laro Ari looked at the true disciples again, like he was looking at a flock of lambs waiting to be slaughtered. Li Liehua shivered inside when he saw the Xuanwu military god fall. However, right now, the 12 citadel demon formation of the ominous was still a certain distance away. By the time he reached the formation, probably all the true disciples would have been slaughtered already. As a result, he could not care about anything else. The scorching war god suddenly pulled the reins on his warhorse. His red mane surged with flames as he raised his front hooves high into the air. He gripped the spear of fire firmly and raised it high into the air, pouring all of his strength into it. The flames around him receded, leaving only the spear in his hand to shine with blinding light. The surroundings darkened. He threw it towards the 12 citadel demon formation of the ominous as hard as he could. A scarlet streak of light shot through the air. His target was Yingzhe. Out of the 11 demon kings, 4 could be targeted. There was no difference at all. This was an absolute difference in strength. Even if all the demon kings of the demon domain were mobilized, none of them would be able to block the spear. However, he had seen the conflict between Yingzhe and Tu Wancheng. Demon folk were extremely resentful and vengeful, so perhaps he would have an extra chance of hitting the target. As long as he killed even a single demon king, the 12 citadel demon formation of the ominous would be destroyed, and Laro Ari would cease to exist. The demon folk would lose their target of worship, and they would be unable to consolidate their military morale. The remaining 11 demon kings would be at the mercy of the scorching war god. Yingzhe's eyes narrowed. The scarlet light stung his eyes. All of the power of the 12 citadel demon formation of the ominous had been used to support the descent of Laro Ari, so it was defenseless right now. If it was just him alone, even if he had discovered the scorching war god's movements a long time ago, he would still be unable to flee. All he could do was wait for death. Chapter 15:13. The tip of the red spear was almost transparent, as if it was made of fire. It reflected Yingzhe's horrified face. The raging flames followed the body of the spear and flew backward, leaving a long trail of red light behind. The spear was still in the hand of the raging fire army god. So what if he was the strongest of the 12 demon emperors? So what if the demon emperor's physique was strong? In front of absolute power, he was as weak as a mortal. In just an instant, he could be completely destroyed. However, in the next moment, the spear froze in midair and fell into a giant black palm. Bayern's mountain-like body moved at an incredible speed, giving people a feeling of absurdity and astonishment. Almost at the same time, another 2 direct disciples died. They were killed by Dao Wu before he could come to their rescue. It clenched its fist lightly, and the fiery spear exploded with a loud bang. The rolling heatwave was overwhelming, and Yingzhe was in a difficult position to defend himself. His eyebrows and beard were all burnt. Knowing that it was Tu Wancheng's intention, his heart was filled with hatred, but he did not say anything. Li Liehua's heart sank. Tu Wancheng looked at him mockingly. "There's only you and me left. If you get off the horse and kneel down now, I might let you live." He treated the direct disciples as if they were nothing. However, these words were absolutely not empty bravado. Under the terror of successively falling, the elite disciples actually didn't dare continue besieging the Bayan, and they were already completely awed. A man of wealth would never sit under a roof. What they had was unimaginable to mortals. How could they give it up so easily? It was not easy for them to hold on and not retreat at this moment. Li Liehua's expression changed a few times. Suddenly, he laughed. Could it be that Li Qingshan's path was real and his was fake? If the fire stopped burning, all that was left was dirty ashes. "Huahua, are you willing to die with me?" "Cut the crap. Your path is my path." "Good." Li Liehua's expression hardened. His horse hooves flew, and the raging inferno army god charged forward, charging towards Dao Wu. Tu Wancheng laughed madly. "You're courting death." Dao Wu stretched his arms and stretched his fingers, grabbing at the raging fire army god. All the true disciples looked at Dai Mengfan. She thought quickly and ordered, "Everyone, come with me to kill demon folk. None of them have the protection of military chi. Anyway, we have to lend junior brother Li a hand." At this time, if he ordered everyone to attack Bayan together, there would definitely be people who hesitated or even directly disobeyed the military order. The situation would be completely ruined. This was the only way to help Li Liehua. He only hoped he could last a little longer. If he could kill 1,000,000 demon folk, then the battle prowess of Tao Wu would definitely plummet. However, He also knew how naive his wish was. Army god of fire won't last that long. What should we do? Kasin heaved a sigh of relief. Dao Wu had given her too much pressure. Although they wanted to leave the battlefield immediately and never come back, they didn't dare to be the first to disobey military orders. If she became the culprit, the Thousand Nature sect would never let her go. Perhaps even the selfless Heavenly Palace would send people to capture her. It would be useless even if she fled to the ends of the earth. Thus, even if he was unwilling, he could only brace himself and do it. At this moment, suddenly, he felt an invisible binding and pressure descend from the sky. The circulation of his magic power became sluggish, and the power of the spells he cast was greatly reduced. Why does it feel like I'm in the border area again? He looked up at the sky. When did the sky become so red? The red seeped down from the sky, soaking through the air and soil like a thin veil. On the blooded ground, the eyelids of a human soldier's corpse suddenly twitched. He opened his eyes again. Strange, didn't I die? He could not help but touch his neck. However, he discovered that the wound was currently healing. Not long after, another voice seemed to be urging him to kill the enemy, to fight. His blood was still not cold. It became even hotter. He thought of the general's order again. Advance. As a result, he grabbed his blade again and climbed to his feet. He felt endless power surge through his body. As far as the eye could see, the corpses stood up again on the corpses strewn across the ground. He swung his blade at a demonfolk corpse that had just stood up and began a new round of slaughter. The Azura field. Dai Mengfan tasted bitterness in her mouth. It just happened to be at a time like this. The structure of the 6 realms of Sazra was not layered on top of one another, nor was it distributed in parallel. Instead, it was a complete entity that cycled about. It possessed an unimaginable structure, and it was connected to the 3,000 worlds, which was why it was known as Samsara. Every single realm had its own special characteristics. The hungry ghost realm constantly devoured, the human realm was all-encompassing, and the hell realm's souls returned to the netherworld. The Azura realm would constantly gather war souls from the 6 realms of Sazra and the 3,000 worlds, converting them into Azura and joining the endless, bloody battle. The will of the Azura realm loved large-scale, high-intensity battles like this the most. Every time something like this happened, the Azura field would definitely descend, temporarily bestowing some of the special characteristics of Azura to the warriors filled with fighting spirit and killing intent, such as the undying body of Azura. The greater the intensity and scale of the battle, the greater the range and strength of the Azura field, which was closer to the Azura realm. The number of people directly taking part in this battle exceeded 5 million. The soldiers on both sides were determined to die. The scale and intensity of the battle were rare even in the entire 6 realms of Sazra. Thus, the Azura field became abnormally vast. Injuries that were originally fatal became insignificant, and even severed limbs could be regrown. The frail body of a mortal could withstand even more intense battles, constantly killing and being killed, enduring the test of intense pain. In the great terror between life and death, a true battle soul was tempered. Of course, they were not Asuras yet, so they could not truly have an undying body. Even Renhuangs could not protect themselves in such a fierce battle, let alone mortals. Moreover, the Azura field did not distinguish between good and evil. Both sides would benefit. As a result, in the end, most of the warriors would still die in the fierce battle. The Azura realm could then retrieve the war souls that had been tested and tempered, transforming them into true Asuras. However, this was bad news for the true disciples. They were already quite ostracized in the demon realm. With the arrival of the Azura field, it meant that the laws of heaven and earth of the Azura realm intertwined with those of the demon realm. This meant that the entire battlefield had become a border zone. And, the Azura realm only favored true warriors. If they did not possess a heart for battle, even Renhuangs would be ostracized. Suffering from 2 layers of rejection in the border zone, some of the true disciples could not even unleash half of their strength. Wn Jianfeng only felt like he was being suppressed, yet he had gained some support. Although his strength was still affected, his morale instead flourished. He formed a seal with his hand. A single sword into myriad swords. Myriad swords pierced through the air. Immediately, over 10,000 demon folk were pinned to the ground. Originally, human emperors were extremely efficient at massacring when they unleashed their own techniques. If they worked together, killing 1,000,000 demon folk was nothing difficult. However, they discovered very soon that most demon folk actually did not die after being killed, unless their bodies had been completely destroyed. Even if only half of their bodies remained, they would still crawl on the ground and roar at the sky madly, gathering military chi towards the Taowu. The bodies of regular demon folk had always surpassed that of regular humans, especially with their startling regenerative abilities. In the Azura field, they were basically like tigers that had grown wings. Every single one of them had become an unkillable cockroach. The true disciples had basically lost all hope. Just now, it was already difficult for them to survive. They were now heavily restrained. Once the Taowu killed the war god of fire and returned, they would not even have a chance to escape. Chapter 15-14. Everyone was helpless. Even Wan Jianfeng hesitated. He considered whether he should conserve some strength and retreat. He could see that the scorching war god could not last too long against the Taowu, erupting into flames under the Taowu's punches. Suddenly, a beautiful figure charged into the enemy formation. Dai Mengfan was surprised too. Yaozhu. Ruan Yaozhu rode the white deer and swept past the surging battle formation. The 9-colored deer shone with 9-colored light, repelling the incoming rain of arrows. She pursed her lips and clenched an embroidered pouch firmly. Her joints paled slightly. She glanced back at Black Cloud City and made up her mind. She grabbed a handful of seeds and scattered them on the ground. A seed drifted through the air, landing in the mouth of a demon folk with his mouth wide open. With a shudder, he swallowed the seed, but there was no reaction. Ruan Yaozhu prayed silently. She was not casting a technique. She was actually praying. The true technique had already been infused into every single seed when she tossed it out. In the demon folk's belly, the seed flashed with green light and was activated. The demon folk collapsed on the ground with a howl, clutching their stomachs as they rolled about. The thorns pierced his skin, greedily drinking his blood. They rapidly engulfed him completely, turning him into a monster woven from thousands of thorns, like a sea urchin. Every single tentacle extended and swung about wildly, wrapping around the demon folk in the surroundings. A demon folk was wrapped around the neck. The sharp thorns almost ripped his neck to shreds. His eyes bulged out as he swung his arms wildly. A demon folk on the side bellowed out and cut through the thorns, but the broken thorns twitched even more violently, worming into the demon folk's eyes like snakes. Finally, he could let out a hysterical cry. A while later, another thorny monster burst out of his body. At the same time, even more strange and malicious plants burst out of the ground. The bewitching man-eating flowers opened and closed like huge mouths, swallowing a demon folk in a single gulp. The thorns in their mouths were like sharp teeth as they chewed away. The mud vines that resembled snakes. The juices were venomous. As long as they came into contact with it, their bodies would rapidly decay like mud. Yellow, muddy water flowed out, seeping into the ground and turning into fertilizer. Even the strongest and most frenzied demon folk let out miserable cries. Pain would always keep people awake. The demon folk that had been devoured. Not to mention the Azura field, even in the Azura realm, it was impossible for them to be reborn. Under such torture, not a single demon folk could maintain their battle spirit and become an Azura. Ruan Yaozhu had a hobby of collecting seeds. All year round, she would issue missions in the Myriad Appearance sect to collect seeds of all kinds of strange plants. These seeds didn't just come from the human Tao, they came from the entire 6 paths of reincarnation and the 3,000 worlds. Some of them even came from the demon realm. For example, the pain brambles. That was one of the tortures of hell, called the Hell of Thorns. After being entangled, even one's soul would find it difficult to escape, and they would have to suffer great pain. As for the man-eating sharp-toothed flowers, they were native to the demon domain. They were most suited to growing in the soil of the demon domain, and their main food was demon folk and magical beasts. And so on and so forth. There was also the inheritance of generations of herb garden masters, as well as her own hard work. She even had seeds from the 9 heavens. However, the area of the 100 herb garden was limited. Although it was not economical, it was harmless and could be planted on the nearby islands. However, many plants were inconvenient to grow, especially the seeds of those evil plants. However, she had to throw these seeds away. That was absolutely impossible. There was no such thing as good or evil in plants. As a result, over time, she had instead hoarded a large number of seeds of evil plants. The direct disciples were all stunned. They had known her for so long, but they never thought that the usually wooden and weak Yarrow Yarrow would actually have a side like that. The scene of those plants devouring and expanding was far more horrifying than fighting with weapons. Ruan Yaoju's expression was stiff and unmoving. As she powered the tome of nature, she constantly scattered seeds. As long as these plants were given an impetus to grow into plants, they would forage for food and grow on their own. The so-called path of nature was not just about the beauty of plants growing and flourishing. There was also the cruel side of natural selection and survival of the fittest. Countless lives were dying or even going extinct at every moment. That was the most primitive war. They spread their branches and leaves and fought for the sky. They dug deep into their roots and fought for the earth. The victor lived, and the loser died. Every moment, and it would never end. To everyone's surprise, the descent of the Azura field did not suppress her at all. Instead, it boosted her power. The tome of nature was not some kind and gentle path of cultivation. Cassin shrank back in fear. She felt like she had become a completely different person. Dai Mengfan used this opportunity to say, "Even Sister Yarrow is working so hard. Why aren't you doing anything?" Bayan's figure had clearly shrunk. Ruan Yaoju's efficiency of slaughter could basically rival the entire Xuanwu army. In particular, the thorns of pain multiplied extremely quickly. As long as there was enough fertilizer, they could basically multiply endlessly. The blades and swords of demon folk were helpless against them. Even when demon emperors and demon kings took action, they were unable to destroy them completely. Their powers had been suppressed by the interweaving laws of the world. However, plants were unaffected by the laws of the world. They would only be stimulated by the smell of blood on the battlefield. As for the demon folk stabbed into the thorns, their bodies twisted as they shrieked out miserably. They were clearly shaking the morale of the army, causing their morale to collapse. By now, she had already entered deep into enemy territory. She had to sort out these seeds and scatter them as evenly as possible, or they would fight and kill one another. The 9-colored deer warned, "Blockhead, your mind is in a mess." Ruan Yaoju murmured, "He didn't have to come. He fulfilled his promise to me." The 9-colored deer said, "You're overthinking it. That kid clearly came back to show off." "Jua, my heart hurts." Ruan Yaoju pressed her chest. Thorns seemed to grow there too. She did not feel it at first, but the pain became more and more intense. The 9-colored deer was speechless. It sighed inside, "Oh, the tribulation of relationship." This was not just because of Li Qingshan. It was also because of Chao Tianjiao, Lu bombing, and so on. What she had gone through in the past few days had greatly impacted her mind. Before this, she had basically never been involved in any battles. She was not even as good as Cassin, let alone such an intense battle. She even forced herself to go against her conscience and slaughter madly. As a result, she made up her mind to take her away from here, even if she had to become a deserter. At this moment, a single large eye looked over, and the unyielding spirit in its gaze caused their bodies to stiffen. Dai Mengfan cried out, "Yaoju, be careful." Flames filled the sky. Bayan had already defeated the war god of blaze. The flames scattered loudly. Li Liehua's fate was unknown. Tu Wancheng sensed that something was amiss. The rate at which his strength weakened had suddenly sped up. The Xuanwu army did not collapse like he had anticipated. Instead, after the Azura field descended, their attacks became even more intense. They tore through the demon folk formations like a hot knife through butter. They did not seem to realize that their commander had already died in battle, or perhaps they had realized, but they still carried out his final orders and march. The true disciples did not scatter and flee either. Instead, they worked together and slaughtered the regular demon folk. Originally, he was eager for them to stay behind so that he could continue his slaughter. At most, a few 100,000 more demon folk would die. They were just ants anyway. However, he had never heard of the myriad sect possessing someone as skilled in slaughter as the woman on the white deer. However, the efficiency of her slaughter basically made his heart ache slightly. Then you can go die. The two war gods had been defeated. Next, it was time to kill all of these true disciples. Ruon Yaroju was the first to bear the brunt. In the blink of an eye, the huge hand extended over from the other end of the battlefield, enveloping her like a dark cloud. Even though it had been weakened slightly, Bayon's existence still stood above all life on the battlefield. Without the war god's obstruction, no one could threaten it anymore. She had entered deep into enemy territory and was alone and helpless. Even if she hid among the true disciples, who would be able to save her? The nine-colored deer lamented, "We're really done for now." The nine-colored hare shone brightly. It did not mind expending its essence energy to fuel its demon chi. Originally, it could move 1,000 kilometers in a single breath. Now, it actually seemed extremely sluggish. Enveloped by the huge hand, even time seemed to come to a standstill. Extreme speed and extreme slowness constantly intersected. It was almost maddening. Ruon Yaroju said softly, sorry. It's fine. Yaroju? Ruon Yaroju stepped on the nine-colored deer's back and faced the huge hand that resembled a dark cloud. No matter how powerful Bayon was, it would take a lot of effort to kill a human sovereign. Its mind could only lock onto one person. The two of them separated, leaving Ruon Yaroju as the only target. The nine-colored deer broke free from the mental pressure and immediately turned into a nine-colored light, fleeing toward the human realm. Boom! The huge hand fell and the earth shook, but it hit thin air. In the nick of time, Ruon Yaroju was grabbed by an invisible force and escaped from the range of the giant palm, escaping from the gap between the fingers. All the demon sovereigns and human sovereigns watched as her thin figure flew toward Black Cloud City, straight into the huge hole that Li Qingshan had smashed open. Tu Wancheng frowned. This was the first time he had failed to kill a human sovereign since the start of the war. He felt an inexplicable sense of unease. However, he did not take it to heart. He glanced at the various plants that were growing wildly on the ground. With a stomp, countless giant trees broke out of the ground and shot into the sky. These giant trees had no branches or leaves, and were as hard as iron. However, their roots were extremely well developed. Within a radius of 300 meters, no plants could grow. They were completely cut off from the earth, and the demon kings and demon emperors cleared them away very soon. Countless plants fought back instinctively, entangling the giant trees furiously, but they remained unmoved. These plants lost the land, and without the nourishment of fertilizers, they gradually withered. However, in a short amount of time, they had already slaughtered several 100,000 demon folk. Not a single one of them could be reborn in the Azura field. Dai Mengfan was filled with regret. If someone could keep Bayon busy for a little longer, they might actually be able to turn the situation around. She did not even seem to know how to fight, but she was actually so suited to the battlefield. If she had known she was capable of something like this, the entire strategy would have been different. However, probably even she did not know about this. The mistress of the herb garden never went to the battlefield. This time, the city was about to fall, which was why she had gathered all the true disciples. However, there were no IFS in reality. It was too late to say anything now. They had lost the two strongest forces, the Xuanwu military god and the Inferno military god. Bayon only needed a few seconds to kill a human sovereign. In less than 10 breaths, the true disciples would collapse. The remaining soldiers of the Xuanwu army and the Inferno military god were even easier to deal with than the plants. Chapter 15:15. In the dark and deep cave, only a ray of light shone in. Li Qingshan lay sprawled on a pile of rubble. His eyes were spinning. Every inch of his body was there, and every nerve was howling. Even his soul was severely injured. He couldn't move a single finger, and could only tremble slightly at an extremely fast speed. His face was a bit blurry as he silently digested the power of this punch. Dao Wu's power was so strong that it could crush everything in its path. He had basically been paralyzed by the punch. If Tu Wanqing had not been so confident and had thrown a few more punches, he really would have been beaten to death. Even for him, there was no safety to speak of in a battle of such scale, let alone absolute confidence in victory. Fortunately, he had already grown used to it. He had wandered on the edge of life and death time and time again, chasing after hope in despair. The battle intent in his eyes intensified. So what if he was sent flying by a punch? All he had to do was crawl back up. The soldiers were still fighting a bloody battle at the front. He never doubted that they would carry out his orders to the end. Those who resisted the urge to charge out immediately had to wait for their wounds to recover. He sent out a call for help along the way, and, if you still don't come, I'm going to be beaten to death. A skull prayer bead rolled out from his chest and transformed into a small skull demon. The sound of its teeth chattering sounded like it was cackling. It spat out a gust of samdi flames of white bone, condensing into 3 words in mid-air, I'm here. Li Qingshan smiled. This was his true trump card. He had not come to die in this battle. The miniature world sped up. Earth, fire, wind, and water all grew and multiplied. From his body to his soul, they were all recovering rapidly. At the same time, his eyes flickered with faint blue light, forming a delicate hexagon, like 2 tiny turtle shells. He used the profound light illuminates all to pay attention to the battle. The true disciple's performance was even worse than he had expected. Not a single one was bold enough to die with the enemy. Otherwise, with so many human emperors and demon emperors working together, they would definitely be able to threaten the Taowu. If it could threaten Bayan, the surprise attack of the raging Inferno army god might succeed. In the end, they did not even unleash half of their strength. All they could do was wait to be whipped to death by the Taowu. They were not even as good as regular soldiers. This was not a difference in strategy or strength, but a complete lack of willpower. As expected, the higher one's status is, the more one cherishes his life. However, at this time, what was the use of cherishing one's life? When Laro Ari was free, none of them would be able to escape unscathed. The path of cultivation was never just a battle of strength, but also a battle of wills. War had always been a confrontation of wills at the highest level. The weak could only die. Senior sister Ruan Yaozhu's performance had also surprised him. Although it was somewhat due to her mental state being stimulated, the strong willpower she displayed and the determination to fight to the death far surpassed that of ordinary true disciples. It wasn't just the seeds that were displaying their power. How could he dare to enter the demon domain at such a time? Oh no, she's probably going to be targeted. Li Qingshan's expression turned solemn. How could he watch as she was killed? He slowly stood up and raised his arms. When the Taowu's palm slammed down, he suddenly opened his arms and used the Ox Demon Theurgy, force field of earth. At the critical moment, he pulled her back from hell. Ruan Yaozhu's reaction was also very fast. Using the force, she flew straight into the belly of the mountain. She plunged into his embrace and said in surprise, "You're still alive." Li Qingshan smiled, "Senior sister, did you think I was dead?" Ruan Yaozhu struggled out of his embrace and urged, "Hurry up and leave." Li Qingshan smiled, "Where do you want me to go, senior sister?" "Leave this place." Ruan Yaozhu said resolutely, "This place is still within the Taowu's attack range." "Then what about you?" "I'm a myriad appearance sect's true disciple. My senior brothers and sisters are still fighting. How can I drag out an ignoble existence?" Li Qingshan's heart shook. He was greatly moved. "Then if I leave, who will protect you?" Ruan Yaozhu blinked and looked at him with a strange expression. Suddenly, she kissed him lightly on the cheek. The 9-colored deer rushed over and saw this scene. He shouted in his heart, "What a sin!" Li Qingshan was stunned for a moment. He touched his cheek and said, "Senior sister, you," although Ruan Yaozhu's face was a bit red, she was very calm. "Qingshan, you have fulfilled your responsibility. You did not betray my trust." The 9-colored deer shouted, "Li Qingshan, Catch her. If worse comes to worst, I will fulfill your wish. Li Qingshan always listened to advice at times like this. He hugged Ruan Yaozhu and kissed her pink lips. After a long time, he let go of her and said, "Ha, this is more satisfying. You're shameless. How dare you?" Ruan Yaozhu's face was red with anger. She made up her mind that if they wanted to force her to stay, she would threaten to kill herself. Thinking of this, she began to shed tears. No matter what, she was going to die. "Senior sister, don't cry." Li Qingshan wiped away her tears and said proudly, "We haven't lost this battle yet." From the great battlefield below Black Cloud City all the way to the demon domain in the distance, there was a path of blood created from sacrifices. The Yang'an abbot led all the disciples of the Pure Land Temple and stood on this path. The battle cries on the battlefield were deafening, as if it was only inches away. The colossal figure of Tao Wu could not be ignored. He glanced at it worriedly before sitting down on the ground and putting down the wooden fish. The disciples all sat down around him and began to chant scriptures. Rings of golden light blossomed and began to purify the land. This was their mission. If they cut off this path of sacrifice, the battlefield would no longer belong to the demon domain, and the demon kings would lose their geographical advantage. The situation on the battlefield would change drastically, or even reverse. However, the matter was nowhere near as simple as that. The war had already lasted for far, far too long. Both sides understood each other's moves. How could the demon folk not have a plan to deal with such an obvious loophole? Before the light of the Pure Land had even shone for very long, a demon folk army composed entirely of cavalry arrived. There were over 10,000 of them, riding vicious demonic beasts and charging towards the Yang'an abbot under the command of the Demon King. The Demon King swung his halberd, and the monster condensed from military chi surged over. "Die, bald donkeys." Looking down from above, the group of several hundred monks was like a mantis trying to stop a chariot before 10,000 demonfolk cavalry. The Yang'an abbot's face hardened. He struck the wooden fish violently, pausing with each strike. He enunciated every word, Namo, A-M-I, Ta, for. A great, golden Buddha rose up behind him, and a halo of Buddhist light descended from the heavens. With each word he uttered and struck the wooden fish, the military chi monster would be heavily injured. After the sixth strike, it immediately collapsed. The frenzied demonfolk were confused, filled with pain and regret. They clutched their heads and tossed away their weapons. As for the demonic beasts, they directly prostrated themselves on the ground, sobbing. The Demon King tottered about like he was drunk. Like he was picking up a flower, the great Buddha grabbed the Demon King gently and crushed him. The monks cheered. Even though he was in the demon domain, the Yang'an abbot was not afraid of an army without a Demon King. The Demon Emperor still posed some threat, but the Demon King was basically throwing his life away. However, his expression instead became even more stern. That was because the second demonfolk army arrived soon afterwards. It was still led by the Demon King, and there were only 10,000 of them. They drove the demonfolk at the front forward, and if they did not advance, they would be killed immediately. The demonfolk rushed over in disorder, and the warrior monks protected the abbot, so they were forced to massacre them. The demonic earth that had just been slightly purified was contaminated again. The great Buddha killed the second Demon King, and just when the demonfolk army began to pause and hesitate again, the third demonfolk army arrived, swallowing the monks led by the Yang'an abbot. Even though they posed no threat to him, just 3 demon kings and 30,000 demonfolk were enough to completely destroy the abbot's plans, keeping the twin fruits Arhat busy. At this moment, he saw the Black Tortoise military god and the Scorching Flame military god being defeated by the Tao Wu army one after another. They were still entangled in the demonfolk army, unable to kill them or not. "Abbot, what should we do now?" The abbot let out a long sigh. He watched as the demonfolk surged over, each and every one of them falling into the evil path and refusing to come to their senses. Flames of indescribable fury surged through his heart. He chanted the 6-syllable Great Clarity mantra, Hum, Bani, Hum, Mi Hum. A smear of fury flashed through the great Buddha's face, and he transformed out of anger. His golden Buddhist robes fell off, revealing his muscles and greenish-black skin. He seemed vicious, terrifying, and vicious, even more so than the demon folk. He wielded a golden sword as karmic flames roared behind him, clearly furious. He transformed into the Wisdom King. He leapt up and descended into the demon folk army, unleashing a massacre. He destroyed all demonic obstructions, slaughtering until blood flowed like rivers and corpses littered the ground, but he still did not stop. With the Wisdom King leading the way, the abbot stood up and made his way towards the battlefield. "Follow me to paradise." The monks brought their palms together and said together, "Paradise, eternal return to the pure land." The abbot's ears twitched, and he heard a strange chime. Like a silver thread, it pierced through the noisy battlefield. Strands of pale white flames extended over from the demon domain. As soon as they came in contact with the demonfolk corpses, they were like fire meeting oil, burning even more vigorously. Even the offerings buried deep underground and the demon blood that had seeped into the earth were all set alight. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a great fire that spread towards the demon folk. They were burnt up in the flames, but there was no pain on their faces. Instead, there was a smile of peace and joy. It was extremely strange, as if the ones going to paradise were not the monks, but them. Within the roaring flames, the abbot widened his eyes in disbelief. The Samdi flames of white bone, perhaps because he was illuminated by the firelight, his face paled. Chapter 15-16. Someone's finally escaped. Byron glanced past everyone with his huge single eye. Do you still want to defy the will of the divine? His tough, arrogant spirit filled the battlefield. No one dared to attack him anymore. He wanted to read, to read, to read. Letien's hair was white, and his face was old. If this continues, more than half of us will die. Is this really a hopeless situation? Under the terrifying pressure, Cassin finally could not help but shrink back. She communicated, "Senior sister, let's retreat." Before Dai Mengfan could answer, Byron interrupted her thoughts. "Only by surrendering will you survive. I'll kill anyone who flees." Tu Wancheng's evil intentions were clear. If he began a massacre, he could kill 2 or 3 more direct disciples at most. The others could always use the opportunity to flee. However, Byron could not pursue them. As a condensation of formations and military chi, he could not stray too far away from the main camp of the demonfolk and the 12 citadel demon formation of the ominous. However, if he said that, any direct disciple who retreated first would definitely die. He had nailed everyone here with a single sentence. They had become fish on the chopping block. This region was still the demon domain in essence. The invisible laws of the world constantly influenced the will of cultivators. It might not have been a big deal normally, but it became extraordinarily terrifying right now. The spiritual pressure of the demon god and the great terror of being caught between life and death weighed down on everyone's hearts. Cassin's expression changed. She could not fight, nor could she flee. It was extremely awkward. Demonic thoughts immediately arose in her heart. She could not suppress it even though she knew the reason. Once their minds wavered, their strength would waver too. With every moment that passed, they would become weaker. However, it was like they had fallen into a swamp. They did not even dare to struggle. They could only watch as the mud swallowed them up. "I can spare your lives, as long as you're willing to accept the blessings of the demonic heaven and fight for the demon domain from now on." The expressions of the direct disciples changed. He wanted them to degenerate into demon emperors. Basically all the human emperors of the myriad phenomenon sect had betrayed the demon domain together. That would be a shocking scandal. Tu Wancheng sneered inside. He had never planned on sparing these foolish cowards. Instead, he wanted to catch them all in one fell swoop and kill them all. He had to receive the blessing of the demonic heaven. This was a heaven-sent opportunity for him to become an evil god. If he couldn't become an evil god, in the future, if Chao Tianjiao that bitch came to kill him, wouldn't he die without a doubt? Thinking of this, his heart turned cold. But then he thought about the time difference between the 9 heavens and the 6 paths of reincarnation. Only then did he feel slightly relieved. If she dared to come now, he would definitely make her fall here. The sky froze in Byron's eyes. The fierce battle on the ground continued. The fearless warriors turned into asuras. They did not know fatigue and enjoyed pain as they fought with all their might. The Xuanwu army continued to advance, and the torrent of steel became more and more turbulent. Although the Black Tortoise army god had collapsed, the morale of the army was still there. They condensed into battle beasts again, devouring all demon folk in their way like they were nothing. The military chi that the demon folk had gathered was all concentrated on Bai'an. Even if they had 10 times the number, they were unable to stop this torrent of steel. Unknowingly, all the true disciples had turned their attention to the ground. If the stalemate continued, the Bai'an would continue to weaken. It might even rush to the front of the 12 citadel demon-killing formation and turn the tide of the battle. The powerful Renhuangs had no choice but to pin their hopes on the mortals. Tu Wancheng glanced at him. He had already stabilized the situation. It was time for him to free up some of these ants. Did mere mortals really think they could overturn the situation? These cowards would not be bold enough to use this opportunity to flee. However, Dai Mengfan communicated secretly, if he destroys the Xuanwu army later, we'll retreat together. Let's leave our fates to fate. There was no need for any other moves. Bai'an swung its huge hand again, slamming it towards the Xuanwu army. The single eye stared at the true disciples closely. They were all extremely nervous. Boom! A grey stone tower tore through the air, charging straight at Bai'an's head. Bai'an shattered the stone tower with a single palm strike. Rock fragments shot out, and dust filled the air. It staggered half a step back. What? Tu Wancheng's expression changed. He raised his guard. Regular human emperors definitely did not possess such power. Don't tell me. There was no one in Black Cloud City. The tower seemed to have been plucked out of thin air and tossed over. In the dark cave, a red light flashed. Its red eyes shone as if a ferocious beast was hiding inside. A large hand grabbed the edge of the cave and leaped out, landing in front of Black Cloud City. Dai Mengfan said in surprise, Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan had transformed into a demon god. His body was 100 feet tall, but unlike before, he still maintained his human appearance. Only his red eyes were like fire, and his red hair was flying. Other than that, there were no demon characteristics. He flexed his left hand. It was a human hand, not a tiger demon's claw. Even he felt a little strange. A strange power surged in his body. It was hot and full of vitality, even suppressing the power of other gods and demons. An earnest voice called out to him, "Come, come, come." It was like a mother calling her wandering son. The voice came from the sky. He could not help but raise his head. Suddenly, a blood-colored vortex opened up above him, expanding and growing. The last wildflower saber in his hand trembled slightly. The soul of the wildflower saber asked with a smile, "How does it feel to be Azura?" "Me, Azura? I told you, you are a natural warrior. The Azura path will always open its doors for you. In this Azura field, true warriors would temporarily gain some of the characteristics and power of Azura. The stronger their fighting spirit, the stronger their will, the more characteristics and power they would gain. Even if they died in battle, their soul would enter the Azura path and reincarnate as a true Azura. And Li Qingshan had gained almost all of the Azura's power and characteristics. The door to the Azura path was also opened for him. He did not need to die in battle to directly enter the Azura path. He would immediately gain more power and become the child of destiny of the Azura path. Li Qingshan smiled, "I see. But I don't like being a son." The soul of the wildflower saber said excitedly, "Then go and unify the Azura path, become the king of all Asuras, and then attack the heaven. Kid, you have a chance, a great chance. Attack the heavens." He had heard of the feud between the Azura path and the heavenly path. The Celestials were the ultimate enemies of Azura, the ultimate battlefield of endless bloody battles. However, he was not yet an Azura, so he did not feel anything about it. "Let's talk after I kill this big guy." Once again, he walked towards the Bai'an. Tu Wancheng was shocked. How dare he? Even if that punch didn't kill him, he was most likely not far from death. If he didn't take the chance to escape, how could he return to the battlefield? The blood-colored vortex in the sky spun faster and faster, moving forward as he walked. With the child of destiny on his body, there seemed to be an invisible halo that attracted all eyes to him. On the other side of the battlefield, the prairie fire was burning away all the blood and filth. Chapter 15:17. Tu Wancheng sneered, just because of this. Everything below Black Cloud City was within Dao Wu's attack range. It gave up on the Xuanwu army and locked onto Li Qingshan. It threw a punch like a black mountain. You're just a living target even though you've become so big. This was not courage, but stupidity. He had transformed into a war god with his military chi, but he was still not Dao Wu's opponent. Not to mention that he had lost the protection of his military chi. A single punch would reduce him to dust. No matter how much he erupted, he could not make up for the huge difference in strength. Cassine bit her lip and thought, no, I can't win. I'm just going to die for nothing. Li Qingshan did not think so. He pointed his blade at Dao Wu's back, and this. Tu Wancheng suddenly looked back, only to see a prairie fire burning over from afar, burning away all the sacrifices and corpses. Resentment and sorrowful cries filled the air. When the Samdi flames of white bone burned away the last of the vengeful souls, the laws of the world broke apart. The demonic sky that enveloped the battlefield rapidly receded, leaving behind a blood-red swirl that spun endlessly. At that moment, all the demon folk panicked, as if they had lost their protection. The morale of the army was disrupted, and their military chi dispersed. The power of the Great 12 Citadel demon formation of the ominous had decreased drastically as well. The formation weakened, and the demon god weakened. Dao Wu's body immediately shrank, and its arms became much shorter. It threw a punch in front of Li Qingshan. The sky fell and the earth cracked. A cloud of dust rose up from the ground, but it was immediately blown away by the strong wind. His scarlet hair danced wildly in the wind. Li Qingshan stepped over the rippling ground and the shockwaves like he was walking on the waves. He remained calm. Tu Wancheng panicked, but he heard Yingzhe's voice transmission, "Don't panic. You're still undefeatable even without the protection of the demonic sky." Tu Wancheng became more and more uneasy. The demon domain never had such a thing as good intentions. He hated Li Qingshan for ruining his plans. I have to kill him immediately. He raised his right arm high into the air, as if he had already touched the sky. He spread his fingers like a huge dark cloud. Suddenly, he blurred, vanished, and slap. This palm strike was unavoidable. Li Qingshan shouted, "Where are the generals?" "This general is here." The commandants of the 5 armies had already discovered his return. This was because the 11 demon emperors were all in charge of the 12 Citadel demon formation of annihilation, and Tu Wancheng did not think highly of small fries like them. Unless the army was utterly defeated. Otherwise, ordinary demon emperors would not be able to threaten them at all. They had stubbornly survived until now, and not a single one of them had died. Dai Mengfan suddenly noticed that there were 5 banners tied to Li Qingshan's fluttering red hair. Just now, in that kind of situation, he actually managed to keep these flags from being damaged. In fact, it was all thanks to Lu Boming's giant spirit armor that helped him withstand a lot of damage. Otherwise, he really wouldn't have the strength to protect these flags. The change of heart was as fast as lightning. The military spirit was like clouds, surging over violently. The sound of metal clashing resounded like thunder, and the earth surged violently. Li Qingshan swung his blade to block, forcefully blocking the palm strike. The reappearance of the Black Tortoise army god. No, it was the Azura war god. Right now, he was not commanding the human army, but the Azura warriors. Even though more than half of them had died in battle. The rest were all lions that had been through hundreds of battles, unyielding souls. The highly condensed military spirit formed a blood-red armor on his body instead of directly forming the Black Tortoise army god. It did not collapse under the palm of the Bayan. However, as a price, it could not provide comprehensive protection like the Black Tortoise army god. Li Qingshan had to bear most of the damage himself. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth, and his organs were all shattered. Every bone in his body was trembling as if it would break at any moment. Even the weakened Dao Wu was. It was still unrivaled. Tu Wancheng also felt that it was inconceivable. He suddenly regretted that he should have destroyed the entire Black Tortoise army instead of coveting those true disciples. Who would have thought that those insignificant ants could become the key to influencing the outcome of the war? I will kill you. The Bayan grabbed Li Qingshan's head. The helmet twisted between his fingers. His head was splitting. He did the same thing again, but this time, he crushed Li Qingshan's head. Under the blood-red swirl, his injuries rapidly recovered with the Azura's undying body. However, he was still no match for the Bayan's destruction. The Samdi flames of white bone arrived on the battlefield silently, quietly devouring the flesh, blood, souls, and living demon folk. The Bayan turned its single eye, searching desperately for the owner of the flames. Actually, Little and had arrived on the battlefield a long time ago, long before the war had erupted. She lay in a river left behind by a flash flood just now, like a set of white bones that had been washed out after being buried for many years. It was the skeleton demon that had been buried a long time ago that had started the fire. She wanted to grasp the situation of the battle on the spot and choose the best moment to ignite the fire. She gave off no aura at all. Even the Bayan was unable to discover her. Without the protection of military chi, regular demon folk stood no chance against the Samdi flames of white bone. As long as they came in contact with even a sliver of it, they would immediately be reduced to a ball of fire. Even more strangely, every single demon folk revealed an expression of peace and joy that demon folk definitely did not possess when they were incinerated. This was not destruction, but deliverance. The Bayan's figure declined at a visible rate, so not only did Li Qingshan block its attack, but when the Bayan lowered its head, light gathered in its single eye, and it raised its head and roared out with the tiger demon's slaughter roar. Roar. The tiger's roar shook the world. The fierce wind rushed over. The Bayan's single eye was firmly shut, and its head was tilted backwards. Tu Wancheng was utterly furious, but he felt like the situation was beginning to spiral out of his control. He seemed to be beginning to struggle against Li Qingshan. In the blink of an eye, the situation had reversed. The true disciples were dazzled as their emotions fluctuated. Even Dai Mengfan was confused. She had no idea whether they should fight or retreat. If they wanted to fight, there did not seem to be a need for them to do anything. If they wanted to retreat, would they be idiots if they retreated now? The expressions of the demon kings changed drastically. What fire is this? Yingzhe said sunkenly, the white bone bodhisattva's Samdi flames of white bone. Bodhisattva. All of the demon kings paled in fright. Vicious, forceful, and even slightly chaotic, they were like a group of frightened children right now. They did not necessarily know the true meaning of these two words. They only knew that it was an existence that had undergone 8 heavenly tribulations and stood at the apex of the entire cultivation world. If the Bodhisattva came in person, even the 12 demon kings would not be able to protect them. They would have to flee back to the demon domain first. No, it's not. When Yingzhe first saw the fire, he was also greatly alarmed, but he calmed down very soon. He discovered that the fire only burned demon folk and not humans. Even the souls of completely dead corpses were allowed to either return to the Hell realm or Azura realm. This was definitely not the white bone bodhisattva's style. In the eyes of the white bone bodhisattva, all life was equal. How could there be a difference between humans and demons? It's a white bone successor. The pale white flames scorched the entire battlefield. The two armies advanced like they were unstoppable. They had already approached the 12 citadel demon formation of the ominous. Battle cries filled the air. The demon kings' faces paled under the illumination of the flames. If they lost this battle, they would all have to atone for their sins with their lives. If that's the case, all we can do is invite a true demon god to descend. I hope that piece of trash Tu Wancheng is ready to accept the will of the demon god Bayan. Chapter 1518. Ding. The sound of the bell sent their souls into chaos. Book, book, book. The demon folk who had already gone mad became even more frenzied. They began to kill one another, swinging their blades at all living creatures before them. Abbot Yangan abandoned the group of monks and rushed into the battlefield. He followed the direction of the ringing sound and searched desperately. It was as if he had gone mad. Where is she? The monks of the world of the 9 provinces had never heard of the white-bone bodhisattva before. They just instinctively felt like it was blasphemy, so they viewed her as an enemy of the Buddha. However, as Arhat Yangan of the 2 fruits, he was not thinking about these 2 words. Instead, he was searching for an answer. Bodhisattva, oh Bodhisattva, why? Why did you betray the Buddha? His heart was filled with sorrow, and his face aged. He neither dared nor could he view that person as an enemy. Didn't you make a great vow to turn the world into a pure land of bliss? The greatest person in the Pure Land sect had inherited the Mahayana Dharma. This person had attained Arhat Buddhahood as a bhikkhuni and received the Wordless Sutra from the Buddha himself. She had once been the glory of the entire Buddhist school and even the Pure Land sect. If she underwent another 8 heavenly tribulations and succeeded, she would be the first mortal to attain Bodhisattva Buddhahood since the 4 great Bodhisattvas. Above the 9 heavens, on the 6 paths of reincarnation, everyone in the Buddhist school watched, but all they received was a set of white bones. She even swore 4 great oaths. The boundless living being swore to kill, the boundless troubles swore to destroy, the boundless Buddhism swore to destroy, and the supreme Buddhist path swore to end. The Buddha mourned, the Buddhist school shook, and the foundation of the Pure Land sect shook. Even now, it had never recovered. Many eminent monks of the Pure Land sect were confused, and their cultivation stagnated ever since. Even if their flesh, blood, and souls were burned to nothingness, he still had to ask just why this was happening. However, when he finally found the source of the bell, all he discovered was a tiny skeleton demon. It carried a bell, cackling as it leapt about on the heads one by one. The head turned around and also discovered the abbot, crouching on the head of a crazed demon king. 2 pale white flames burned in its eye sockets as it tilted its head and stared at him, as if it was asking, "What are you looking for? You're not." The abbot returned to his senses and also sensed something amiss. The Samdi flames of white bone had been carefully controlled, yet it only burned demon folk and not humans. This was truly strange. Even the Whitebone successors were far too strange. If the legendary path of Whitebone was capable of distinguishing between good and evil, what was there to criticize? Amidst the chaos of the battlefield, in the soul-stirring sound of the bell, he put his palms together and prostrated himself on the ground. If you are the successor of the Whitebone, please tell me the reason. I will die without regrets. A monk. The Demon King beast's last shred of rationality was drowned by anger. It pounced toward Abbot Yangan, its mouth full of sharp teeth. Wisdom King descended from the sky and chopped off the Demon King beast's head with his sword. It rolled to the front of Abbot Yangan. The skeletal demon stepped on the ground like a roller. He couldn't care less about cackling. With great difficulty, he finally stopped. He raised his head and spat out a mouthful of samadhi white bone fire at Abbot Yangan. Abbot Yangan waved the Wisdom King away, neither dodging nor blocking. His gaze was firm. The pale flame was right in front of him. Just as it was about to burn his eyebrows, it formed words in the air. Form is not different from emptiness, and emptiness is not different from form. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. The Heart Sutra. The Abbot Yangan was stunned. However, the skeleton demon had already leapt away. The sound of the bell faded away, and chaos spread out. The abbot furrowed his brows and thought hard. The Wisdom King watched over him. He constantly slew demon folk. In the half-dried river, the white bones were half-buried in the mud. Little Un thought, I'll scare this monk away first, just in case he comes looking for trouble. If I burn those mortals, Qingshan definitely won't be happy. Although determining the difference between mortals and demon folk was not easy, she did not want to upset him unless she had no other choice. She used the skeleton demons as her eyes. She controlled the samadhi white bone fire carefully, sometimes converging and sometimes spreading. Sometimes it rose, sometimes it fell. When it gathered, it bloomed like a white lotus, swallowing the relatively more powerful existences like demon generals and demon commanders. When it dispersed, it rained down, sprinkling countless demon folk. When it rose, it rushed into the sky, grabbing the flying demonic beasts like pale white hands. When it descended, it burrowed into the earth, seeping through like water. Even the white bones buried deep in the battlefield were incinerated. She also paid attention to Li Qingshan's movements at all times. With a bang, his brain exploded. Tao Wu used its full strength to crush Li Qingshan's head. Tu Wanqing said viciously, "Let's see if you can survive this." Tao Wu reared its head back and laughed madly, its voice shaking up the surroundings. Qingshan, little, and sat up. The expressions of all the true disciples changed. He had returned in such a powerful manner, yet he still could not fend off the weakened Tao Wu. The headless Li Qingshan threw a punch at Tao Wu's face, shattering its smile. Li Qingshan was not dead. Slivers of flesh and blood, pieces of shattered bones, and the shattered head reassembled. Not a single drop of blood was lost. Not a single head was missing. Tu Wanqing's laughter froze. Frenzied Flower Blade laughed. This idiot, does he not know what Azura's immortal form is? Under the protection of the blood-colored whirlpool, Li Qingshan was practically the real Azura sovereign. The so-called Azura's immortal form was not only a resurrection after death, but also a true immortal body. Even if his entire body were to explode, he could instantly reassemble it, let alone his head. The only problem was the exhaustion of power. After exhaustion, he would still die. However, he still had the boundless earth beneath his feet, as well as the Ox Demon's divine earth power. When the two were combined, he became a true immortal body. It was as if the Azura realm was expressing goodwill to him. Come, try it before you buy, the Azura realm is your home. Li Qingshan laughed. If you can't kill me, then die. He headbutted Tao Wu's body. With a crack, the top of his skull was shattered, but he did not care. He was used to using this move, Ox Demon butts horns. Only Tiger Demon Dig's heart could compare. Even without the horns, he was not afraid. The top of his skull could still be used to ram people, and he could even inject more vibration power. Tao Wu's body staggered. The enraged Tu Wanqing attacked Li Qingshan in a frenzy. I'll kill you. Kill you. Under the stormy barrage of attacks, Li Qingshan's head was blown up again. His body collapsed piece by piece, almost reduced to mincemeat. A beam of demonic light shot out from the single eye of the Tao Wu, splitting him in half. Ha 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 ha. The two halves of Li Qingshan's mouth laughed at the same time. He simply gave up on defense and attacked crazily. Frenzied Flower Blade danced wildly, slashing at Tao Wu's body. The wind from the blade flew fiercely, red like fire. Most of the time, he was a monster that did not have a complete human form. The maniacal laughter from his mouth did not seem like it came from a human. It seemed like it came from the blood-colored whirlpool in the sky, shaking Tao Wu's proud and unyielding spirit. Little and lay down in peace again. Everyone was dumbfounded. Wen Jianfeng thought to himself, I'm afraid my sword can't slay such a person. He asked Dai Mengfan, senior sister, should we lend a hand? Dai Mengfan sighed. This is no longer something we can intervene in. Let's hide further away. Looking at the situation, it was only a matter of time before Li Qingshan overwhelmed Tao Wu. If they were to rush over to help, not only would they not be of much help, they might even be dragged down with him. That would not be worth it. Meanwhile, the battlefield on the ground was also in full swing. The soldiers' morale was rising as they continued to advance. The steel torrent was unstoppable. They were no longer needed to help. They heaved a huge sigh of relief and revealed a relieved smile. Indeed, Spirit Sovereign Gui Hai had great foresight. It was all thanks to this child. Otherwise, even if half of them perished here, they might not be able to win. No, they would definitely be defeated. Heaven's will, oh heaven's will. Le Tien's face was radiant. His white hair turned black, and the wrinkles on his face disappeared. Senior and junior brothers, are you convinced of your loss? There's no need to wait for 30 years. After this battle, he will be a true disciple. He might even be the eldest senior brother. Kasin was full of praise. Sister Yaroju, you really have a good eye. Such a person could not be restricted by a mere human sovereign. Even the previous eldest senior brother, Lin Xian, could not compare to him. If they could become Tao partners, she would be willing to marry him. The battle had reached its final stage. The terrifying shadow seemed to be dissipating. However, at the same time, the demon emperors who heard Ingja's words were all shocked. The 12 citadel demon fiend array could create the incarnation of the demon god through the totem pole. It contained the demon god's spiritual will, but it did not have its own consciousness. It was completely controlled by the main demon emperor. With Tu Wanqing's strength, it was extremely difficult for him to control such a huge force. Every demon emperor or human sovereign led an army of around 500,000. This was the limit. Therefore, Dao Wu only had 3 moves, 1 slap, 1 stomp, and 1 glare. It was even simpler and brainless than a normal person's fight. It did not even use 1/3 of its combat power. Ingja's so-called inviting the real demon god to descend was not the demon god himself. It was summoning the demon god's consciousness and pouring it into the incarnation of the demon god. In an instant, it could explode 120% of its combat power, or even more. This was because the methods of the real demon god were beyond the imagination of ordinary demons like them. However, even the demon emperors did not want to see such a situation. The former demon god might not respond to the summon. They were not Tom, Dick, or Harry who came at their beck and call. There were countless important things that they needed to think about. Such a local war might not be worth their attention. A victory in one corner of the chess game might cost them the loss of the whole game. Secondly, even if the demon god responded to the summon, there must be a sacrifice, which was a demon emperor, which was Tu Wanqing in Dao Wu's body. The 12 demon gods were all temperamental. They might not be able to bear the consequences of disturbing them. The demon emperors exchanged glances and thought, this old man wanted to summon the demon god's consciousness from the beginning and offer Tu Wanqing as a sacrifice. Isn't he afraid that the demon god will vent his anger on him? He is indeed from the chaos lineage. No matter how far-sighted he is still a lunatic in his bones. Brother Ingja is right. Tu Wanqing is useless. He should have been sacrificed a long time ago. Ingja said, then let's begin. Victory or defeat depends on this move. Victory or defeat depends on this move. The core of the 12 citadel demon formation of evil flickered. Tu Wanqing's heart skipped a beat as if a disaster was coming. He suddenly said, Ingja, you old dog. Chapter 15:19. Dao Wu suddenly froze. Li Qingshan had already grasped Tu Wanqing's position. Thousands of saber rays converged into a single saber and pierced straight into Dao Wu's body. Break! The giant blade broke through the layers of military qi and stabbed straight at Tu Wanqing. Tu Wanqing's eyes rolled back, his face contorted, and his body trembled. Just as the blade was about to touch his body suddenly split down the middle. 2 halves of his body, 2 eyes, and 2 mouths slowly spat out, a bunch of trash. His voice was like a piece of hard wood that pierced right into their ears and into their brains. The 11 demon emperors all had a splitting headache, their faces changed drastically and they kowtowed on the totem pillars. The corner of Yingzha's mouth curled up. The offering had been accepted. Li Qingshan's saber pierced through the swanni, but there was no joy on his face. When he tried to pull out the saber, there was an unusual force that tightly grabbed the ending frenzied flower saber. The frenzied flower saber soul warned, Qingshan, something's wrong. Bayan was shrinking at a speed visible to the naked eye, but the military qi was not dispersing, but condensing. With a bang, the ground shook. The million remaining demon folk suddenly collapsed on the ground at the same time. Their bodies shriveled up as if they had been sucked dry. Strands of demon qi gathered towards Dao Wu. This was no longer just military qi, but all of their essence, qi, and divine souls had become sacrifices. Only a small number of demon kings and demon emperors were left trembling. The battle cries that soared into the sky came to an abrupt end. The soldiers who had been fighting with all their might suddenly lost all their opponents. The battlefield immediately quieted down. This kind of strong contrast caused everyone's chest to feel stuffy, and they felt so uncomfortable that they wanted to vomit blood. Cassin's beautiful face turned pale. She covered her mouth and retched. Terror filled her beautiful face. The true disciples, who were originally relaxed and chatting, turned pale. They vaguely understood what had happened. They were closer to gods than mortals. He also understood how terrifying it was. Letienne felt incredulous. How is this possible? How could such a war attract the demon god's consciousness? Although the human sovereigns attached great importance to a mere black cloud city, even so, he had already given up. He had never thought about asking a human immortal for help. Needless to say, there was no need for a true immortal to come and save them. It was simply not worth it. Looking at the overall situation, this was just a local war, and the outcome was irrelevant to the overall situation. In the long run, it was normal for the front lines to shift back and forth. As time passed, no matter how many people died in battle, they would soon be born again. Even the death of a few human sovereign realm cultivators was nothing. Would they still need to worry about the lack of talented cultivators in the world? If he was above the 9 heavens, it would only be the time of a game of chess. The 6 paths of reincarnation and the 3,000 worlds had already experienced countless life and death situations. How could a chess player jump into the chessboard to save a pawn? It wasn't that he was cold and heartless, but that he really couldn't care less. Moreover, what if he had made this move himself? The principle of it is better to lose one player than to lose the first was simple. What mattered was the overall situation. As for whether the chess pieces were willing to be sacrificed or not. In fact, it didn't matter at all. Any chess player would rather win without sacrificing any of their pieces, but there was also another chess player sitting opposite them, and the entire game was out of their control. What more, a pawn crossing the river? But once the chess player personally entered the game, even if it was just a finger, the situation would change drastically, and he could even take away the opponent's general. The originally blurry figure of Dao Wu suddenly became clear. Its skin was wrinkled like a withered ironwood, and its body was straight and strong. It reminded Li Qingshan of the giant wood tribe of the 9 prefectures. A single huge eye was full of vigor. It rotated in its eye socket, taking in everything. Finally, it returned to Li Qingshan. Who are you? Li Qingshan felt like he was struck by lightning, and felt that he had to answer. He didn't dare not answer. I am. At this time, the figure of Dao Wu had shrunk to the same height as him, but the oppressive feeling didn't decrease, but increased. The single eye seemed to look down from the sky, coldly overlooking the common people. The soul of the frenzied flower blade shouted, "Qingshan, retreat." This fearless and proud divine weapon also felt a deep fear. This wasn't an illusory totem, it was a real god. It was different from the monster just now, which relied purely on accumulating power. Even if only a trace of its will descended, its essence would be above all existences present. Dao Wu descended, arrogant and powerful. I am your grandpa. Li Qingshan stepped on Dao Wu's chest, trying to pull out the frenzied flower blade. Heh! Dao Wu used its withered wood-like hand to slowly grab the blade. Crack! Cracks spread out. This indestructible divine weapon was as fragile as ice in his hand. With a ping sound, it broke, and the blade was destroyed. The other hand took the opportunity to insert into Li Qingshan's body. Its 5 fingers grew like a tree, then branched, then grew again, and branched again. Black branches densely penetrated through Li Qingshan's body. Li Qingshan's eyes widened, and he coughed out a mouthful of blood, which sprayed onto Dao Wu's chest. He couldn't recover. Dao Wu pulled his crippled body closer and said mockingly, "Undying form of Azura?" In a single moment, Li Qingshan suffered tremendous damage, even exceeding all the damage he had suffered since the start of the battle. The undying form of Azura had its limits, but Dao Wu easily broke through this limit, inflicting irrecoverable wounds. As the battle on the ground came to an end, the blood-red swirl in the sky rapidly shrank. No matter how many demon folk little and enlightened, he was unable to shake its existence. Ying Zhe's smile twisted. This is a demon god. This was no longer a difference in strength, but a difference in cultivation. Dao Wu asked once again, "Who are you?" He seemed very concerned about this question. He had not descended to win the battle, but for the demon heart of Black Sun. However, He had not actually come for the demon heart of Black Sun. Instead, he wanted to grasp the opportunity and change, so he needed to enter the chessboard and observe it personally. He had obtained this opportunity just now after suppressing the other demon gods, and the situation did not disappoint him. The appearance of the white-bone bodhisattva's successor was already earth-shattering news. However, compared to the man in his hand, it was nothing. Through the fragmented, undying form of Azura, the intertwining of fate had become so complicated that even he could not see it clearly. There was a vein among them that even made him feel awe. So he asked again, "Who are you?" Li Qingshan's lips trembled. Dao Wu moved closer. "What did you say? It hurts. Then answer me quickly." Dao Wu was already running out of patience. "Quick." Li Qingshan suddenly stabbed the broken blade into Dao Wu's single eye. Dao Wu's eyes narrowed. Thousands of black logs grew out of Li Qingshan's arm, completely locking down his movements. A mere human sovereign realm cultivator dared to attack him. This kind of thing was already very unusual. The single eye seemed to see through the trajectory of fate again. "Are you a legendary person?" "No, don't answer me. I'll see for myself. Legendary people can't be killed so easily. If other demon gods were here, they might have to observe and not kill so easily." However, Dao Wu was not that kind of coward. He suddenly understood why the demon gods allowed him to observe them, as well as why Qiongqi smiled strangely. Chapter 15-20. The true disciples kept quiet out of fear, and no one dared to step forward to help. Even Wen Jianfeng, who was not afraid of death, let go of the hilt of his sword. A kind of terror that surpassed death stopped him in his tracks. Novels, it was like facing a bottomless abyss. Even the bravest warrior would stop in his tracks. This had nothing to do with cowardice. It was completely out of instinct, because the abyss was unconquerable. One couldn't even stare at it for too long. Otherwise, one would have the illusion that the abyss was staring at them. The soldiers of the Xuanwu Legion were at a loss after losing the enemy. They had finally killed their way through the enemy's formation and arrived in front of the 12 Citadel Demon Annihilation formation. But what should they do next? Without a new order, they couldn't do anything to those towering pillars. As the blood-red swirl in the sky receded, the power bestowed upon them by the Azura realm receded like the tide, making them feel deeply exhausted. They felt like they could no longer endure this set of armor. As a matter of fact, if it were not for their unity and their tenacious willpower, most of them would have collapsed on the ground like the demon folk. A wave of despair spread like a plague. They had already obeyed military orders and followed their general to fight to the death, but were they still unable to achieve victory? The man they had placed all their hopes on seemed to have lost the strength to resist. In the vast sea of people, someone let out a desolate cry, "General!" The hilt slipped from Li Qingshan's hand. At this moment, he felt so lonely. He hadn't given up yet, but his arm was completely twisted, accompanied by unprecedented pain. It even far surpassed the hellish pain he had experienced in the past. Every time he thought that the pain had reached its peak, those huge forked logs would further fork, increasing in number by countless times, penetrating and tearing every bone and every blood vessel. The Azura's undying body seemed to have become the source of the pain. A normal person would have gone mad, and even a cultivator with a strong will would probably want to die. There was great terror between life and death. Li Qingshan was no exception. He was scared to death and in pain. And the ironic thing was, at times like this, the flow of time had always been abnormally slow, allowing him to clearly distinguish every trace of fear and pain. He could not help but complain, "Why do I have to suffer like this?" He would also feel regret, "If I had known this would happen, I wouldn't have come. Let these bastards die." But when this thought flashed through his mind, he couldn't help but laugh. He laughed at himself for being a mortal after all. However, when that smile appeared on his face, the corners of his mouth twitched slightly. Bayan's eyes narrowed, and she was a little stunned. His smiling. In those crimson eyes, there was no hatred or anger. In the abyss of fear, he silently endured the pain, still absorbing the power from the boundless earth bit by bit, injecting it into this broken body. Then, He used his flesh and blood to break the giant trees and branches. Catcher! Catcher! These densely packed sounds caused everyone's scalp to go numb, and the true disciples widened their eyes. It was as if he was looking at a monster. Just now, when he gave up on defense and attacked in a frenzy, they were already shocked. Now, their feelings were simply indescribable. Yingzhe also felt a shiver run down his spine. He suddenly realized that Tu Wanqing's defeat was not a coincidence. His opponent was not someone that anyone could defeat. Where did this kid come from? He's even more like the Demon Emperor than the Demon Emperor. There's no way the Myriad Appearance sect could cultivate such a disciple. Wait, he can't be the legendary person chosen by the demon realm, right? Li Qingshan continued to struggle in a very ugly manner. Even if he died in battle here, even if he could not make it to the 9 heavens, he would not let this life of his down. As long as he was alive, even if it was only for a split second. He had to continue forward. A thought flashed through Bayan's head, this is far too strange. Perhaps he really is the legendary person. Then he became even more vicious. A dead legend isn't a legend. Release him. An extremely furious voice rang out. The pale white sea of fire burned away the corpses of 1,000,000 demon folk. The flames gathered towards a set of crystalline white bones in the sky. The flames that were originally silent now surged violently, like the flames of endless fury. You're still bold enough to come out. Bayan was rather surprised. Since when had the path of white bones become so loyal? Little and said nothing. The flames condensed into a pale white bone claw, reaching towards Bayan viciously. It illuminated the world, turning it pale. The Samdi flames of white bone condensed from the corpses of several million demon folk condensed into the bone claw. It was even larger than Bayan himself. The claw was basically earth-shaking. If you had undergone the 5th heavenly tribulation, you might have posed some threat. Bayan was unfazed. With a wave of his hand, the bone claw collapsed layer by layer before dispersing back into regular Samdi flames of white bone. Just like Tu Wanqing, little and had yet to attain Sichuohan fruit, so she struggled to control the Samdi flames of white bone condensed from the corpses of several million demon folk. If she were dealing with regular demon kings, she would obviously be able to kill them with a single swipe, but she was rather powerless against Bayan's avatar. The flames dispersed. Bayan was about to kill her as well, but she suddenly discovered several dozen vicious skeleton demons on the ground charging towards the 12 citadel demon formation of the ominous, the totem pole that belonged to her. As it turned out, she also understood that it was impossible for her to threaten Bayan. The bone claw was only a diversion. The key was still to destroy the 12 citadel demon formation of the ominous. What cunning, but it's a pity that it's useless. Bayan pressed down again, and huge, black logs shot through the air, crushing every single skeleton demon. She dodged several times, but she was still struck by a huge log. Her sternum shattered, and she fell out of the air. The abbot Yangan finally discovered the white skeleton successor he had been searching for so long, but he was surprised by her fury. He gazed at the white skeleton in the sky before looking at Li Qingshan and suddenly understood something. He stood up and chanted the Great Clarity Mantra. The Wisdom King possessed him, and he rushed into the air, swinging his sword at Bayan. Demon subduing. Bayan squinted his eyes slightly. Damned bald donkey, you're bold enough to throw your life away. You want to go to the Western Paradise? I'll disperse your soul, and you'll never be able to reincarnate again. He grabbed him in his hand and crushed him to pieces. Right when he was about to completely erase his existence, a beam of Buddhist light descended from above, enveloping Bayan's hand and dispersing it silently, revealing the abbot's soul inside. It glowed with faint light. Auspicious clouds surged in the sky, and the chanting of Buddhist scriptures could be heard. It seemed close yet unreachable, enough to make people yearn for it. Bayan said sternly, "Guided Buddhist light." This Buddhist light originated from the Western Paradise, and was personally guided by Gautama Buddha. However, it was not something an ordinary monk could enjoy. He suddenly realized that he was not the only observer. The abbot put his palms together and said with a peaceful expression, "Qingshan, I can only help you this much. You have a compassionate heart and are fated to be with Buddha, so you'll definitely have an extraordinary fate. He then revealed a hint of compassion. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. I understand this principle. The world is not a pure land, and all living beings are foolish and stubborn, but they are worth sacrificing for. Namo Amitabha. To be continued. Chapter 15:21. However, little An knew that the latter words were meant for him. He was probably afraid that he would walk the same path as the white-bone bodhisattva. However, she didn't care about the lives of others, not to mention sacrificing herself for them. She only cared about one person, and she didn't care about sacrificing herself. However, the Buddha's light that fell from the pure land of ultimate bliss made her feel inexplicably close. Was this the so-called 10,000 Buddhas greeting the sect? The boundless Buddhism, the infinite magical powers, all returned to Gautama Buddha like rivers returning to the sea. Yangan's soul rose in the Buddha's light, returned to the pure land of ultimate bliss, and gradually disappeared. In an instant, the Buddha's light bloomed and shone on the earth. One could vaguely see a big Buddha sitting at the end of the auspicious clouds, smiling indifferently. The demon emperors screamed. White smoke rose from their bodies as if they were being corroded by poison. The core of the formation shook, and Laroari's body shook as well. His body melted like snow under the scorching sun. However, his one eye was still staring at the big Buddha in the sky. He looked up and roared, "Rely, if you are really merciful, why don't you save the lives of the demons?" Li Qingshan's eyes flashed. He had been patiently waiting for such an opportunity. Without hesitation, he twisted his neck and bit Laroari's wrist. With a crack, he bit it into pieces. The branches of the giant tree in his body turned into dust in an instant. Endless power came from the earth, and his broken body recovered quickly. The blood-colored vortex in the sky was still there. As long as the fighting spirit and the Azura didn't die, all his patience was not meaningless. Li Qingshan gritted his teeth and rushed to the 12-citadel demon formation of evil. Once again, he advanced. The Buddha's light suddenly disappeared, and the sky returned to the darkness. Under the scorching sun, a figure could be seen running wildly on the ground. He was as strong as a mountain. His hair was red like fire, and he was panting like a bull. He was like the legendary Kwafu chasing the sun. Laroari lowered his head and looked at Li Qingshan. He seemed to recall something, and his eyes were filled with pity. What's the point? Boom, boom, boom. Countless giant black trees pierced through the ground. They pierced through Li Qingshan's feet like a clump of sharp grass. His body instantly lost its balance and rolled to the ground, crushing countless thatch. His whole body was drenched in blood. However, he was still moving forward, rolling and crawling. Just as Laroari was about to step forward, he suddenly lowered his head. Unbeknownst to him, vines that looked like dragons and snakes had grown under his feet. It wrapped tightly around his feet. A beautiful figure stood at the top of the Black Cloud City. Ruon Yaroju held a bamboo stick in her hand and activated the natural heavenly book. She chanted an incantation and exerted all of her magic power. He silently gave all his blessings to that pathetic figure. Pursing her lips, she recalled the kiss just now. It was a feeling she had never experienced before. Her mind was in turmoil, and she couldn't control herself. It even overshadowed the instinctive terror of the gods. Yaroju, you stay. It was just a kiss. He was already not calling her senior sister anymore, and he was even making decisions for her on his own. If you were on the battlefield, I would have to split my attention to protect you. Even if I could win, I wouldn't be able to. These words were simply infuriating, as if she was a useless piece of trash. However, she believed him, because he would definitely protect her, even at the cost of his own life. Biting her lip, she smiled slightly. Qingshan, who is protecting who now? Boom. A huge black tree pierced through the air. It pierced through her delicate body. Yaroju. The 9-colored deer lamented. Not all the human sovereigns are useless. Laroari strode forward. Breaking the withered vines, he took one step and arrived behind Li Qingshan. The look of pity on his face became even more intense, and his attacks became even more brutal, ready to kill. An abyss-like darkness enveloped them, but Li Qingshan didn't look back. The next moment, flames illuminated the darkness. A man and a horse rose into the air, advancing forward with raging flames. Li Liehua was still alive. He was inside the raging inferno military god, and Huahua had shared most of the damage. Just now, Laro Ari's attack wasn't fatal. Although he wasn't favored by the Azura path like Li Qingshan, he was still an adopted son, even if not a biological son. His injuries were also recovering rapidly. However, the situation on the battlefield changed too quickly. By the time he had recovered, Laro Ari's consciousness had arrived and suppressed everyone. Huahua advised, "Liehua, stop. You've done your best." "No, I haven't." Li Liehua looked at Li Qingshan, who was struggling in the hands of Laro Ari, and felt his blood boil. The flames in his heart burned like never before, like a volcano that was about to erupt. He always thought he had done his best, but it turned out he hadn't. Flames were always afraid of not burning thoroughly enough. How could they be afraid of burning out? "He will die." "I know, so, shut up, get on." Li Liehua mounted his horse, condensed his military chi, and reconstructed his military god. Man like fire, horse like a dragon, charge, god of war. Laro Ari didn't even look at the incoming flame spear. With a turn of his eyes, he found Li Liehua's location through the heavy military chi. A thin black light shot out from his eyes and into the space between Li Liehua's eyebrows. The flames in his eyes immediately froze and dimmed, and he fell from his horse. The raging inferno military god collapsed. Flames shot into the sky, and heat waves rolled like 10 volcanoes erupting at the same time. The ground was burned into magma. In the next instant, Laro Ari walked out of the sea of fire, unharmed. Little and stood in front of him. The white bones turned into a beautiful face again, and there was a red mole between her eyebrows. The 3 burial robe floated in the air. Just now, the Buddha's radiance did not cause her any harm. Instead, she seemed to have comprehended something. The Samdi flame of white bone condensed again, but it was no longer a ferocious bone claw. Instead, it was a palm with slender fingers, pale and lustrous. It formed a lotus seal and attacked Laro Ari. As expected of the successor of the white bone bodhisattva. "You have such high comprehension." Laro Ari glanced at her, then at the figure that was still struggling forward. "But is he worth sacrificing your life for? As long as I want to, I can destroy you immediately." Bang! He didn't dodge, and took the blow on his chest, leaving a deep handprint. The pale palm crumbled, but it also shook his body. He took half a step back, and this was the first time he took a step back since he descended. But he didn't take the blow for nothing. As he retreated, he stretched out his arms and grabbed at Li Qingshan. He was determined to kill him. Li Qingshan almost crawled to the 12-citadel demon formation of evil. A stone pillar that reached into the sky blocked his way. His back was cold, and pain and fear spread rapidly, eroding his life. He roared angrily, and desperately opened his arms to hug the stone pillar. Yingzhe recovered from the pain of being illuminated by the Buddha's radiance. Impossible. The totem pillar is the foundation of the 12-citadel demon formation of evil. It uses power to condense and reconstruct the earth and stone. Even if all the true disciples attacked together, they wouldn't be able to destroy it in a short period of time. Li Qingshan fiercely stomped down, and a roar burst out from the depths of the earth. Rumble. The stone pillar shook violently, and the earth and stone tumbled. With a loud bang, it was uprooted from the ground. Yingzhe was dumbfounded, and his heart trembled. Is this really just a human emperor? Such strength, it's like a primordial godfiend. Wait. Herculean godfiend. Could it be? The core of the formation twisted, and it collapsed into circles of demonic light that swept across the heaven and earth battlefield. 12-citadel demon formation of evil, broken. Chapter 1522. Bam! The totem pillar shattered, and rubble flew everywhere. Bayan's head was tilted to the side, and its single eye was wide open. Li Qingshan's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. He struggled violently, but did not make a sound. It was as if magma was rolling in the depths of the earth, and all of it was suppressed in his chest. Silence, silence. If he did not explode in silence, he would die in silence. He took a step forward, raised the totem pillar, and smashed it down. Bayan staggered backward, and Li Qingshan advanced again, smashing again. Bam! 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 The totem pillar shattered into pieces. Li Qingshan advanced, and Bayan retreated. Be it the human sovereign or the demon sovereign, they all seemed to have been woken up from a dream, and fell into another dream. Even the gods can retreat. And they were forced to retreat by a person. The blood-colored vortex that was gradually shrinking in the sky suddenly expanded rapidly, and a faint whistling sound could be heard. The 12 citadel demon formation of annihilation quickly collapsed, and the totem pillars fell down one by one like dominoes. At this time, Li Qingshan stopped in his tracks. Even with the endless divine power of earth and the Azura immortal body, he could no longer suppress his injuries, and his will had reached the pinnacle. His heaving chest suddenly stopped, and he let out a roar that seemed to come from the depths of the earth. His blood was magma, and his broken bones were rocks. The roar tore apart the great silence between heaven and earth. The high and mighty human sovereigns, as well as all the cowards, were terrified and shocked, as if they were facing another demon god. And the ordinary soldiers, as well as all the brave people in the world, let out the same roar. Bayan finally changed color, and at this moment, the human overpowered the god. You really are. Li Qingshan supported the half of the totem pillar, and the two giants stood facing each other. Bayan's expression was solemn, as if he was facing another god, and not a human sovereign. He asked again, "Who are you?" Li Qingshan finally answered. Lao Ari laughed. It was not a mocking sneer, but a carefree laugh. It was a laugh like a mortal. Very good. I will remember this name. We will meet again. Li Qingshan's expression was as indifferent as a god's. He spat out 2 words, definitely. At this time, the last totem pillar slowly collapsed, and Bayan's body shrank rapidly. It was shaped like a black tree, but all its leaves and branches had withered, leaving only a lone tree trunk with a few broken branches. It was like an arm with all the fingers cut off. A voice came from the middle, finally, "Clean up the waste of resources." In an instant, dozens of giant black trees shot out explosively. Kusin felt that a great disaster was coming. Before she could react, she felt a sharp pain in her chest and was pierced by the huge wood. She desperately wanted to escape from the Yang spirit, but the Yang spirit was nailed to this body by the huge wood. No, the huge tree instantly forked again and again, and a black branch as thick as a finger pierced out from her beautiful eyes. It was a face as delicate and beautiful as a flower. She was pierced by the densely packed black tree branches, causing her face to be unable to distort as she silently fell from the sky. In an instant, 6 true disciples died, their bodies destroyed, and their souls destroyed. Li Qingshan closed his eyes and frowned, thinking of Wan Yarozhu. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. A few huge black logs flew past him, but none of them landed on his body. The only true disciple who was not targeted was Li Liehua. He woke up from the darkness. He asked doubtfully, "Am I still alive?" Killed by the devil god, his soul should have been destroyed, and he could not even enter the reincarnation cycle. Moreover, this place was neither like the infernal realm nor the Azura realm. Dead man. Huahua cried tears of joy. He hugged him tightly in his arms. Bayan seemed to be in a hurry to kill Li Qingshan, so he could not exert his full strength in a hurry, or the raging inferno army god had blocked a lot of damage. That black light that was as thin as a gossamer only heavily injured his consciousness, causing him to fall into a state of unconsciousness. Li Qingshan opened his eyes, ignoring the call of the Azura realm. He ignored the cheers of the crowd and walked toward Black Cloud City. Take this opportunity to kill him. At this stage, if we lose, you know what will happen. Yingzhe pointed at Li Qingshan's back and ordered threateningly. He was the first to charge. The demon emperors looked at each other, knowing that Yingzhe was right. If they lost this battle, even the demon emperors would have to bear heavy responsibility. Not to mention running away without a fight, it would be a dead end. They also rushed forward. Anyway, Yingzhe would be the scapegoat. If they could not do it, they would leave him at the back and push all the responsibility to him. Dead people would not argue. Little An waved her hand, and the pale hand formed by the samdi flame of white bone passed Yingzhe, who was leading the charge, and grabbed another demon emperor. Why? The demon emperor was shocked, but when he saw Yingzhe behind Li Qingshan, he burst like a soap bubble. Yingzhe, fuck you. He immediately activated his demon heart, wanting to demonize and fight to the death. However, the pale hand seemed to contain a power similar to the Buddha's light of guidance. It completely restrained his demonic power and crushed him into pieces with a light grip. Yingzhe's figure appeared 100 miles away, fleeing toward the demon realm. He looked back and said, "A bunch of idiots." This was a man that even the demon god was unable to kill, and yet a mere demon emperor dared to make a move against him. Putting aside the fact that he was unable to kill him, even if he was able to kill him, Zhongxian couldn't help but shudder. This was the successor of that person, someone who could turn the entire demon domain upside down. He secretly rejoiced that he had this illusionary bubble shadow, which allowed him to escape. At this moment, a gloomy voice sounded. "Yingzhe, where are you going?" "Faceless demon god." As Yingzhe fled, Little An killed another demon emperor. The remaining 8 demon emperors immediately scattered, but they were blocked by the remaining true disciples led by Dai Mengfan, who began to take revenge. Sword Light whistled. Wn Jianfeng fought the 3 demon monarchs alone, returning to his usual fighting style. Immediately, he felt like a fish in water. He survived Swanni's last attack with his peerless swordsmanship. However, for some reason, he felt a sense of loss, as if he had missed something. Compared to the war just now, the battles that could normally make him excited were like children's games, becoming dull and tasteless. He was at a loss. Was I wrong? But what am I fighting for? Then, he looked at Li Qingshan's back. What is he fighting for? Li Qingshan was bending down to pick up the saber hilt that he had dropped. The remaining consciousness of the frenzied flower saber soul was like a gossamer in the wind. "Qingshan, what a wonderful battle, but I can only stop here. You are a good saber." Li Qingshan smiled, not feeling sad at all. This was the destiny of a warrior, as well as the destiny of a weapon. If he couldn't die on the battlefield, it would be a pity. If saber souls have a next life, I'm willing to be reborn as an Azura and fight alongside you. Let's see what kind of enemies there are in the 9 heavens. The frenzied flower saber soul suddenly cheered up. Okay, it's a deal. Li Qingshan suddenly felt a lump in his throat. Holding the saber hilt tightly, he threw it toward the blood vortex in the sky that was gradually closing. The last frenzied flower saber turned into a red light and disappeared along with the blood vortex. In an instant, the power of an Azura was withdrawn from his body, and his body gradually shrank. However, he still felt as heavy as Mount Tai, and it was difficult for him to move. He took a deep breath and continued forward. At this time, the true disciples had already won an overwhelming victory. After losing the unified command, the demon emperors immediately became a plate of loose sand, and they were all anxious to escape. They couldn't even fight one battle. Li Qingshan did not even glance at the intense battle behind him. He staggered into Black Cloud City, only to see Ruan Yaozhu meditating and adjusting her breathing. The 9-colored deer assisted her from the side. Her wounds from the huge piece of wood had already almost recovered. Only a thin, red mark remained on her snow-white skin. Seeing Li Qingshan, she was pleasantly surprised and said, "Junior brother Li." Li Qingshan answered with a grunt and collapsed on the ground. Even the incarnation of the demonic god Swanni failed. The faceless evil god dragged a broken arm and played with Yingzhe's head with one hand. His featureless face fluctuated. The Black Sun demonic heart is most likely with that Li Qingshan. I'm afraid he is the legendary person. This is a heaven-sent opportunity for me to become a demonic god, and I can't let it go. Yingzhe's head cried, "Lord, please spare my life." Observing the expression of the faceless evil god, Li Qingshan knew he couldn't escape. Instead, he laughed. "You, an evil god, dare to interfere in such a great calamity." The faceless evil god crushed Yingzhe's head and disappeared. In the blink of an eye, He appeared above the black cloud city, and reached out his hand to grab Li Qingshan. Qingshan, like a lightning bolt, little and couldn't react in time. Even if he couldn't resist an evil god. At this moment, 7 stars shone in the vast sea of clouds and turned into a saber, falling from the sky and chopping off the other hand of the faceless evil god. A silver-armored Valkyrie descended from the sky. It was Chao Tianjiao. With a cold expression, she pointed her saber at the evil god and was about to take revenge. Out of the corner of her eyes, she saw Li Qingshan's face, and her eyes suddenly widened. Chapter 1523. Turbulent waves crashed against the cliffs. The Wanxiang city was situated on the vast ocean. As the most powerful and open sect in the human realm, the city was always bustling with people. The tragic war far away in the world seemed to have nothing to do with this Cape City. Day after day, year after year, even though half of the direct disciples died, the sorrow was quickly washed away by the waves. Yesterday, the city was filled with tears. Today, it was filled with joy and smiles. This was neither the heavenly path nor the path of hell. This was the human realm. There was no eternal joy, nor unchanging pain. The city was bustling with noise, welcoming guests from all over, making it especially lively. Chaotic Life Lane was filled with gamblers, but Letienne was not in the lane but in the direct inheritance hall. All the doors and windows were open, the sun shone, solemn and quiet. His face was obviously much older, whether it was the white hair on his temples or the spreading wrinkles at the corner of his eyes, they were all signs of decline. Yet, he still had a casual smile on his face. He rubbed his chin and squinted his eyes. Such a pity, I missed a good bet. Pai Yongqiu heard him and laughed. Who would be willing to bet with you? Letienne pursed his lips and said in disdain, I am not willing to bet, there are many fools who want to bet, but what's the point of a sure win bet? I also need to accumulate some luck. Pai Yongqiu looked at him and nodded, I hope you can win. Who knows? Letienne shook his index finger and pointed upwards, heaven's mandate is the highest. Pai Yongqiu was about to speak when Dai Mengfan slowly walked over and walked up the stage. She held a jade pendant in her hand and was dressed to the nines. She was graceful and elegant, causing many inner disciples to be stunned. Usually, they did not have the qualifications to enter the direct inheritance hall, and the chances of seeing this direct inheritance hall leader were even rarer. How could a mortal woman compare to such beauty? Only Shen Yushu was uneasy in the crowd, as if he was sitting on pins and needles. He did not have the slightest bit of lust, he kept praying in his heart, don't be him, don't be him. Dai Mengfan stood on the stage and looked over. Half of the familiar faces were gone, even after half a year, she could not help but sigh, but it was not the first time she saw such a scene. Very quickly, she adjusted her mood. New direct disciples would quickly emerge from the inner disciples. The 6 realms of reincarnation, 3,000 worlds, had no lack of talented people. Shockingly talented people emerged in an endless stream. But from today onwards, no one could compare to the name on the jade tablet in her hand. He cleared his throat and said, I just received news that senior brother Li Liehua has decided to go into seclusion and withdraw from this year's election. The inner disciples were in an uproar. Doesn't that mean only, Shen Yushu, that? The inner chamber disciples around him instantly cleared out and looked at him with pity and mockery. The true disciples were not surprised at all. It was expected that Li Liehua would choose to go into seclusion. Who would have thought that the battle between Lai Hua and Black Tortoise would end in such a way? The sudden emergence of a free man walked in front of the crowd at an unbelievable speed, but they could not help but admire him. Facing a true god and winning against him, he turned the tide. Not to mention in the myriad sect, which human emperor could do it? So, Dai Mengfan paused. This generation's big brother is Li Qingshan. Just as Dai Mengfan finished speaking, rolling laughter came. Ha ha ha, what a waste of time, just say my name. Li Qingshan walked in with big strides. As if a gust of wind blew, the crowd could not help but make way, like wheat sprouts falling to the sides. He rushed to the stage in a few steps, gave Dai Mengfan a bear hug, then turned to face the direct disciples and inner disciples, waving his arm. A phoenix stood on his shoulder. It spread its wings and cheered, "Big Daddy, you are the best." Li Qingshan put his index finger on his lips and smiled, "I know." Li Fengyuan shouted, "Long live Li Qingshan." Yes, Li Qingshan nodded approvingly. Everyone was dumbfounded. Dai Mengfan glared at him fiercely, greatly surprised. How strong was he? She could not even react to the hug, it was like she was being hugged by force. But, with such a big brother in Black Cloud City, I can stay away from the war. With the announcement of the final result, Li Qingshan's ranking on the myriad phenomenon list immediately rose to the top. All the cultivators knew that the myriad phenomenon sect had another big brother, who would in fact rule the entire myriad phenomenon sect, control a huge amount of resources, and decide the life and death of countless people. This result was not unexpected. Before this name had already spread throughout the myriad phenomenon sect and even the entire human world after the battle in the demon realm. A person who defeated a god. If not for countless people witnessing it with their own eyes, no one would believe such an absurd story. The more powerful the cultivator, the more they understood how invincible a god was. A god was not only a symbol of power, but also wisdom and laws. But there were still some people who believed that this was a big game of chess played by the desireless heavenly palace, and that it was Chao Tianjiao who became a human deity and became one of the 6 deities who finally turned the situation around. Li Qingshan was only pushed to the front of the stage, used to attract more cultivators to join the myriad phenomenon sect, to make up for the losses of this battle. But the true disciples did not think so, otherwise Li Qingshan would not have become the big brother. In terms of contribution, Li Qingshan was enough to become a true disciple, but he could not surpass the accumulation of other true disciples for many years. He was even a little worse than Ruan Yarozhu. More important was the choice of the true disciples. When Li Liehua was in a life-or-death seclusion, they all had the right to compete. However, the big brother had great power, and also had to bear the responsibility of leading the war against the demon realm. Even if they knew that the demon realm would not come back in a short period of time, and Black Cloud City should be very peaceful, after this battle, no one was willing to take this risk again. The roaring thunder cloud formation would take a long time to recover, and if Bian came back to find trouble, then it would really be the end of the world. Only one person did not feel this psychological pressure. Pai Yangqiu looked at Li Qingshan, who was grinning from ear to ear, and muttered, "Doesn't this kid know what fear is? I already said, he is a real gambler, born to gamble." Le Tien looked at the dome and said meaningfully, "I don't know if I will be lucky enough to see him." At this time, Dai Mengfan came down from the stage. Although the atmosphere was disturbed, the ceremony still had to continue. "Disciples, follow me to greet the big brother." Her hands were crossed, and her wide sleeves drooped, and she deeply bowed to Li Qingshan. All the true disciples and advanced disciples bowed, and said in unison, "Greetings, big brother." Li Qingshan's expression became serious, and he waved his hand, "Everyone, please rise." Dai Mengfan's eyes twitched slightly. "This word," Li Qingshan asked, "Junior sister, what is it? Is there something wrong?" Dai Mengfan had a resigned expression. "Nothing, you are the big brother, you have the final say." "That's good." Li Qingshan nodded with satisfaction. "I have high hopes for you. This position will be yours sooner or later. Big brother, you can keep it for yourself, I can't bear it." What should I say next? I know. Li Qingshan thought for a moment. "First, I have to thank. Yo, who is this? So majestic, so glorious." Unknowingly, Chao Tianjiao sat on the windowsill, stroking the black rabbit in her arms, and stared at Li Qingshan with a face full of evil intentions. In the battle of the demonic domain, she finally defeated the faceless evil god. While listening to Ruan Yaozhu's report of the battle, she held the hilt of her saber, and stared at the unconscious Li Qingshan for a long time. As she watched, she ground her teeth. Ruan Yaozhu shuddered in fear, afraid that she would kill Li Qingshan in a single stroke, so she put in a lot of good words. Finally, Chao Tianjiao said, "Wait until he wakes up." Then she left. She had been promoted to the 6th Ding Immortal General, and was the Ding Maroshan of the 6th Ding, directly under the command of Zhenwu Great Emperor, and was busy with daily affairs. The time difference between the 9 heavens and the human realm was huge, so she waited for more than half a year. Li Qingshan was shocked, and took a step back. Let's talk. Chapter 1524. Chao Tianjiao gnashed her teeth in hatred. She had thought that he had fallen, and she was really a little sad. In the blink of an eye, he appeared in front of her alive and kicking. She understood at that time that he had cultivated some kind of cultivation method that allowed him to not die even when his yin spirit was extinguished. In other words, the words he said before his death were all to fool her. She, Chao Tianjiao, had never suffered such a great humiliation. While the true inheritors were still able to withstand it, the chamber disciples were already shivering in fear. Their teeth were chattering, and they were trembling uncontrollably. Li Fengyuan shrank back and said in a low voice, "Big Father, where did this woman come from? She seems a little powerful. More than a little powerful." Li Qingshan's mouth twitched. Chao Tianjiao was originally very fierce. Now that she had cultivated to become a human immortal and ascended to the 9th heaven, she was many times more powerful. If they really fought, he had no confidence at all. The key was that he also felt a little guilty. Although he had helped her at that time, it was still taking advantage of her. At this time, everyone could see that this original big apprentice sister and new big apprentice brother had some enmity. Today, she came with bad intentions. No one dared to interfere and just stared at the play. Shun Yushu immediately recovered his spirit and was very happy. Li Qingshan, Li Qingshan, offending me is fine, but you actually offended a human immortal. Senior apprentice sister Chao's position is now equal to the 2 sect masters. No, it's half a level higher. She is now the head of Ding Shun, the favorite of Emperor Zhenwu. Not only can you not be the big apprentice brother, you will also be expelled from the sect. Ruan Yaozhu frowned and was about to speak when she looked at Chao Tianjiao and then looked at Li Qingshan. She seemed to understand something and snorted lightly. "Okay, let me hear what you have to say." Chao Tianjiao smiled slightly. She was so beautiful that one could not look at her directly. Li Qingshan, with the good intention of turning hostility into friendship, immediately recited 2 lines of a poem. "A day as husband and wife means 100 days of love. 100 days as husband and wife are as deep as the ocean." Oh no, there was progress in the ape demon transformation recently, and it was about to break through. Everyone was dumbfounded. What does that mean? Before he could finish his sentence, the knife was already on his neck. Chao Tianjiao was so angry that she laughed. "You really know how to talk." Li Qingshan's neck immediately turned cold. Instead, he became arrogant and said, "Chao Tianjiao, senior martial sister Chao, I admit that I've treated you fairly. If you're still not satisfied, you can kill me or cut me into pieces." However, he secretly clenched his fists. How could I allow myself to be trampled upon by others? If push comes to shove, then we'll just have to fight for 300 rounds. So what if you're a human immortal? Chao Tianjiao said, "I won't kill you, I won't cut you, I just want to chop you." Li Qingshan thought to himself that this was a good deal. He had the Phoenix's nirvana to protect him, so no matter what, Chao Tianjiao couldn't kill him with a single slash. He might as well give her a slash. Forget about this grudge. Alright, go ahead. If I even frown, I'll change my surname to yours. The knife in Chao Tianjiao's hand slowly slid down, right between Li Qingshan's legs. Li Qingshan shrank back. "Wait, what do you mean by this?" Chao Tianjiao mocked. "What, are you scared?" The hall of direct teachings was completely silent. Everyone watched without blinking. This development was too explosive. "I remember, we made a bet before. We'll fight to the death 30 years later. During this time, you won't touch a single hair of mine." Li Qingshan wouldn't even frown if his head fell off. But if he took this slash, he wouldn't be called General Crawling on the ground anymore. He would be called Big Eunuch Senior Martial Brother instead. Damn, these 3 words, Big Senior Martial Brother, were really unlucky. "Really?" Chao Tianjiao revealed a thoughtful expression. Taking advantage of the moment when Li Qingshan was slightly relaxed, she suddenly raised her hand and the knife fell. Blood splattered everywhere. Hiss. The men couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air, as if they had been stabbed. Looking at Li Qingshan again, both of his hands were tightly holding onto the blade. Fresh blood was dripping down the blade. If his reaction wasn't fast enough, this slash would have really hit him. His face turned green, and his veins popped out. You. Sorry, my hand slipped. Chao Tianjiao calmly sheathed her knife. Since there was a bet, I'll forget about it today. She grabbed Li Qingshan's clothes and pulled him over. She proudly announced, but from today onwards, you're my man. Don't be fickle in the future. Otherwise, it won't just be one slash. What? Li Qingshan was stunned for a moment. It didn't seem like a bad thing, but why did it sound wrong? Be good and wait for me to come. Chao Tianjiao laughed loudly. Her laughter was as cold as an ice river. She seemed to be very happy. She turned around and turned into a ray of silver light, piercing through the sky. Everyone was stunned. They looked at Li Qingshan with different expressions, as if they were looking at a living monster. Li Fengyuan's eyes widened. Big Daddy is really unfathomable. I look up to him. Le Tien slowly spat out 3 words, I'm convinced. Who in the sect didn't know about Chao Tianjiao's temperament? Moreover, she cultivated the heavenly book of Black Tortoise, which was a cruel and resolute cultivation technique. Therefore, no one could have imagined that she would one day become a Tao companion. Although it was a bit of a reversal of yin and yang, in the cultivation world, the strong were always respected. Being visited by such a human immortal was not a bad thing. Shun Yu's face turned ashen, as if he had lost his parents. There's actually such a thing in this world. Li Qingshan was still in a daze. Ruan Yarozhu walked forward and expressionlessly said, Congratulations, big senior brother. Yarozhu, you. Ruan Yarozhu raised her hand, please treat big senior sister well. Don't be fickle. She turned around and walked away. Me? Fickle? Li Qingshan pointed at his nose, feeling that it was ridiculous. He muttered to himself, I am clearly dissolute and lecherous. Congratulations, big senior brother. Congratulations, big senior brother. Double happiness today. You and big senior sister are really a perfect match. The true disciples came forward to congratulate him. In any case, the position of big senior brother had been decided. In essence, he was the acting sect master of the myriad phenomenon sect. Even true disciples had to obey him. Now that he had become a Tao companion of a human immortal, it was even more incredible. Coupled with the faint support of Spirit Emperor Gui Hai, he might be the most powerful big senior brother in the history of the myriad phenomenon sect. Since it was related to his personal interests, he naturally had to curry favor with him. Moreover, during the battle in the demon domain, Li Qingshan's performance had truly convinced everyone. They did not feel that he was condescending to flatter him. At this moment, the bells and drums in the city rang, and flowers bloomed. A celebration was held to celebrate the new big senior brother's ascension. Li Qingshan did not know whether to laugh or cry. All he saw were sincere smiles of admiration, but he felt very stifled in his heart. Suddenly, he saw Shen Yushu in the crowd quietly shrinking back. He shouted, Stop! Shen Yushu trembled and turned around. Big senior brother. I had forgotten about you. You are like changing your face down there. You really like to see me make a fool of myself. Shen Yushu knew that he could not escape this calamity. He hardened his heart and wanted to throw out a few tough words, thinking that Li Qingshan would not dare to kill him. However, when the words reached his mouth, they became, I don't dare. Li Qingshan turned to ask Dai Mengfan. Junior sister Dai, do I have the authority to teach him a lesson? You are the big senior brother. You have the final say. Dai Mengfan still said the same thing. She glanced at Shen Yushu. He was just a chamber disciple. Although he had the chance to become a true disciple, it was clearly gone now. Who asked him to offend someone he should not have? Li Qingshan waved his hand. You are expelled. Quickly pack up your things and scram. The true disciples looked at each other. They felt that Li Qingshan was really bold but careful. He learned all kinds of tricks without a teacher. Even if it was the big senior brother, it was not allowed to kill a fellow disciple without reason. However, if it was not a fellow disciple, then it was fine to kill him. The path of cultivation had never been a beautiful paradise. The big senior brother's main responsibility was to fight against the devil domain. Most of the time, it was military law and not sect rules. As long as there was a valid reason, even a true disciple could be expelled from the sect. Coupled with his frightening battle strength, who could be his opponent? This was the true core of the Wan Seong sect. In essence, they still relied on strength to suppress others and not voting. Shun Yushu knelt on the ground and cried bitterly, "I have eyes but cannot see. Big senior brother, please spare my life." Li Qingshan was puzzled. "I did not say that I would kill you. Why would I spare your life? Oh, are you afraid that I will expel you first and then chase after you? Heh, do you think I am that kind of despicable person? If I wanted to kill you, I would have beaten you to death with one punch. Junior sister Dai, do I have this authority?" This. Dai Mengfan was speechless. The big senior brother killed an inner disciple of the same sect in front of everyone. No matter what, this could not be justified. "I know." Li Qingshan raised his thumb. "I am the big senior brother. I have the final say." His face was brimming with a confident smile. The true disciples felt a chill in their hearts. He might really do this kind of thing. It was better not to contradict him in the future. Quickly get lost. Don't wait for me to change my mind. Shun Yushu left in a hurry. He could not have any thoughts of revenge in his heart. In the middle of the jubilant sea in the city, Spirit Venerable Gui Hai stood with his hands behind his back, looking at the endless sea. Chao Tianjiao stood on the overhanging eaves. Her cold eyes were like stars. She looked back and asked, "Spirit Venerable, who is he?" There was a huge difference in the flow of time between the 9 heavens and the mortal realm. Why did he come back at the right time? Was it a coincidence? Or was someone arranging it? It would be fine if someone arranged it. If it was really a coincidence, then it was too inconceivable. Chapter 1525. Heaven's Will. We are cultivators. 1. Reading books. W. Chao Tianjiao laughed heartily. Cultivators all had the ability of divination. After becoming a human immortal, even if they did not know this Tao, they would still be able to sense it. But the more it was so, the more they looked down on the so-called Heaven's Will. The reason why mortals revered the gods was that they were elusive and unpredictable. If they could be pondered and guessed, then they were just slightly more powerful people. Heaven's Will was the same. Since she already had the word immortal, she could be considered to have seen the door. The so-called Heaven's Will is just a collection of the 3,000 great Taos and infinite laws. Don't tell me you are talking about something like the world will. The mortal Tao did not even have the world will. Spirit Venerable Gui Hai's expression drifted. Who knows? Who knows? Chao Tianjiao guessed that the old man was immersed in his thoughts again. She shrugged and said, "See you later." She stepped forward, the void rippled, and disappeared. Le Tien held the 3-legged golden toad and walked towards chaotic life lane. The golden light of the 3-legged golden toad was dim, its eyes half closed, looking listless. During the battle in the demonic region, it was all thanks to the 3-legged golden toad that blocked Dao Wu's final attack. But it was also heavily injured, unable to extend his life. His lifespan was almost up, he did not have long to live. Li Qingshan caught up from behind and patted his shoulder, smiling brightly. "Hey, Le Tien, when are you going to die?" "Eldest senior brother, I will not die at any time." Le Tien had a helpless expression. Not long ago, he was bossed around by him, but now he was so direct. 1. Reading books. W. Sai, I heard you're about to die, right? Li Qingshan did not hide his regret at all. My lifespan is almost up, not dying. Le Tien explained patiently. That's right. Li Qingshan did not agree. You make it sound so elegant. Doesn't reaching the end of your lifespan mean you are about to die? You're the eldest senior brother, you have the final say. Le Tien gave up on trying to stop Li Qingshan from cursing him in front of his face. In that case, you still want to make a bet with Oxhead and Horseface? Li Qingshan was excited. They were all mythical figures, how could he not be interested? It's just Oxhead Arbian. He's in charge of my dossier. Dossier? Li Qingshan became even more curious. The three-legged golden toad slowly opened its eyes. The golden pearl-like eyes glanced at him before slowly closing again. Have you never heard of the Book of Life and Death? The two of them walked side by side. Along the way, the path was peaceful. Everyone took a step back. After Letien's explanation, Li Qingshan finally understood that the main scope of businesses of the netherworld located in the path of purgatory was not ordinary humans, but cultivators. That was to be expected. In the 6 paths of reincarnation and the 3,000 worlds, countless lives were lost every second. Even if the number of humans was taken into account, it was still an astronomical number. Book of Life times 1Ka? Not to mention the 10 kings of hell and the 10 commanders of hell. Even if there were hundreds or thousands of them, they would not be able to deal with them all. It was even more impossible to record their names in the Book of Life and Death and then send soul reapers to drag them all to the netherworld for trial. Therefore, ordinary living beings were allowed to live and die as they rotated in the 6 paths of life and death. Whether they rose to the heavenly Tao or fell to the hungry ghost Tao depended on the laws of the 6 paths of reincarnation. The Book of Life and Death recorded the names of cultivators. Those low-level cultivators did not even have the right to be on the list. If you stayed at home to refine your qi, build your foundation, and extend your lifespan by 100 years, no one would have the patience to care about you. Only golden core and nascent soul cultivators could record their names in the Book of Life and Death, but as long as their lifespan was not abnormally long, these names would not even be seen by humans or ghosts. If you could live for a few thousand years without dying, it was considered your ability. As for those who could make the legendary black and white impermanence, Oxhead and Horseface personally take action, they were all extremely powerful cultivators, like young spirit cultivators like Letien. That was because once they reached this realm, there were too many ways to extend their lifespan. There were countless exotic flowers, herbs, and miraculous pills that could preserve one's life and calm one's mind. The method to extend the life of the golden toad was only one of them. If a young spirit cultivator had the spirit of living a bad life is better than dying a good death, they could basically hang on until the end of time. The netherworld mainly targeted this group of people. The Book of Life and Death would automatically calculate the lifespan they should have. It was not completely forbidden to extend one's lifespan, but it had to comply with the basic laws of the netherworld. A cultivator was not allowed to exist indefinitely. When the time came, they came to claim their lives. In order to avoid the human emperor who knowingly broke the law and violently resisted the law, they had to send the ghost immortal Yin commander. Otherwise, if the ghost officials of the netherworld fought with the cultivators of the human world, it would not be a good sight. Li Qingshan clicked his tongue in wonder. There was actually a reason like this in the familiar story of his past life. He could not help but think of the myriad poison ancestor who had abandoned his body in the 9 provinces. He wanted a nascent soul to live in the world. A baby could not exist on its own for long, but an adult could. In other words, once one cultivated the yin spirit and yang spirit, they would be close to immortality. There was no need to cultivate to become a true immortal or arhat. It was just that there was a divine factor controlling this situation. That was true. Even a piece of trash like Shun Yu Shu could cultivate to the yin spirit and even had a chance to cultivate to the yang spirit. Cultivation required great talent and luck, but even if there was one yin spirit cultivator in 1,000,000 people, the number would be terrifying. If it was not controlled, the world would probably be full of cultivators. Wait, in other words, my name is also in the Book of Life and Death. Of course. Legend has it that the Book of Life and Death is the manifestation of the laws of heaven and earth of the path of hell. Since you have this cultivation, you naturally have a name in the Book of Life and Death. Letien glanced at Li Qingshan disdainfully. Although he had become the eldest senior brother, he was still a country bumpkin at the end of the day. However, he was squinting, so the disdain in his eyes was very hidden. Li Qingshan hurriedly asked, "Then can I erase my name?" Letien looked at him with even more disdain. The Book of Life and Death was not a book. It was not even a magic treasure. Of course you can, As long as you can distort the laws of heaven and earth of the path of hell and destroy the laws of reincarnation. Hehe, this is not completely impossible. But with that method, even the 10 Yama kings can't do anything to you. Why would you need to change the book of life and death? Li Qingshan touched his chin and thought, maybe the 10 Yama kings have a grudge against me? Or maybe I am just unhappy. You. Le Tian's heart shook. He could actually hear an earth-shattering tone. He suddenly recalled the scene when he faced Dao Wu on the battlefield in the demon domain. With his personality, even if he met the 10 Yama kings, he would probably not bow down to them. He would rather be sent to the infernal hell. If one day, he really had that kind of power, Pa. Li Qingshan smacked the back of his head. Was that the way you looked at eldest senior brother just now? Le Tien touched his head and said with a frown, it was clearly eldest senior brother who was in the wrong verse. Oh, you still dare to talk back. I want to hear what I did wrong. Li Qingshan clenched his fists. He still remembered how Le Tien had used him as a gamble. Life and death are small matters, but I still want to gamble with Oxhead Arpang. You asking me when I will die is asking me when I will lose. Li Qingshan nodded. Yes, that makes sense. I was really in the wrong. Heh, I can apologize to you, but you must call me when you make this bet. Why? I want to see what that Oxhead looks like. I might even want to place a bet on you. Then you will have to take a trip to the gates of hell, Le Tien warned. For cultivators, especially Renhuang cultivators, the last thing they wanted to see was the Commander Yin. He was not a spiritual beast from the Garden of Spiritual Beasts, but a man-eating monster from the Path of Demonic Beasts. I'll keep you company, Li Qingshan smiled. Hell Path, Oxhead Demon, Life and Death Match, it would definitely be very interesting. To be continued. Chapter 1526. After Le Tien left, Li Qingshan looked back. The towering sky towered into the clouds. Seeing the Oxhead of the underworld was just out of interest. What was most important now was to prepare for the upcoming trip to the sinkhole. Where was the sinkhole and what kind of place was it? As an imitation, although he had the spirit turtle bloodline, he did not have the spirit turtle heritage. Even his bloodline was not pure enough. Wasn't there a genuine spirit turtle here? He could ask for guidance. Li Qingshan flew straight to the highest point of the sky without any obstructions. This was one of the privileges of an eldest senior brother. He found Spirit Sovereign Gui Hai. Spirit Sovereign Gui Hai remained secretive as he looked at him silently, waiting for him to speak. It was as though he had expected him to come. Li Qingshan cupped his hands and said, Spirit Sovereign, may I ask where the sinkhole is? You want to go to the sinkhole? Spirit Sovereign Gui Hai closed his eyes. Li Qingshan said, yes. Give up. You are not a real spirit turtle. Spirit Sovereign Gui Hai warned, but he knew that he would not give up. Li Qingshan bared his teeth and smiled. Racial discrimination isn't good. Spirit Sovereign Gui Hai said, it's not discrimination. There are many people who go to hell and return. None of them can return after entering the sinkhole. Is it that terrifying? I do have a spirit turtle bloodline after all. Li Qingshan laughed, but he did not think that Spirit Sovereign Gui Hai was deliberately lying to him. He had entered the sinkhole to meet a prisoner that Su Mirao did not even dare mention by name. Yet, he was trapped by the sinkhole. It was obvious how powerful the sinkhole was. If you don't listen to your elders, you will suffer. Spirit Sovereign Gui Hai shook his head and walked away with his hands behind his back. Old man, there's an old saying that suffering is a blessing. Li Qingshan blocked his path. Spirit Sovereign Gui Hai narrowed his eyes as a cold glint flashed. Punk, do you really think I can't do a thing to you just because you have become some eldest senior brother? Bah. In front of human immortals and demonic immortals, eldest senior brother is nothing. Li Qingshan rubbed his chin. He chuckled, however, it seems like you really can't do anything to me. He moved closer and asked, hey, what are you afraid of? After a few rounds of probing, Li Qingshan basically confirmed it. Venerable Spirit Gui Hai would not do anything to him, even after communicating with Elder Tian Shu, who was above the 9 heavens. Now that he had become a Ren Huang, even if Spirit Lord Gui Hai wanted to do anything to him, he would not be able to kill him. If they really fought, the sky would definitely be destroyed. As the saying goes, the barefooted are not afraid of those who wear shoes. Naturally, the superiority of the hooligan proletariat should be brought into play. Cold light flashed through the Spirit Exalt Guihai's eyes as he said earnestly, "Since you possess the bloodline of a spirit turtle, why don't you know how to protect yourself?" Li Qingshan asked, "How to be wise? How to protect yourself?" Spirit Sovereign Guihai said, "You are just a tiny chess piece on the chessboard. This is your greatest blessing." "Why do you say so?" "The more useful a chess piece is, the more dangerous it is. If it becomes more useful, even if it can be complacent for a while, it will eventually be attacked and killed." Li Qingshan restrained himself and listened attentively. The Battle of Black Cloud City is just a small dispute at the edge of the entire chessboard. You were almost smashed to pieces, and your soul was destroyed. If you go deeper into the hinterland and try to affect the overall situation, you will be immediately taken away. Taken away? Li Qingshan was shocked. He smiled again and said, "These chess players really don't follow the rules." He understood that the chessboard was just a metaphor. If the chess players were really provoked, there was nothing they could not do. Stealing chess pieces, flipping the table, and even smashing the chessboard in the face. Phew. Therefore, he understood his position even more and felt more at ease. If any demon god personally took action, they could easily wipe out Black Cloud City. They could easily wipe out Black Cloud City. The only reason they hadn't done so was because it wasn't worth it. There would be people who would do the business of killing people, and no one would do the business of losing money. If a game of chess was a sure win, who would be willing to break the rules? Not only would it not break the rules, but it would also force everyone to play according to the rules, and win everything safely. In other words, for the time being, he did not have to worry about gods suddenly descending from the sky and slapping him to death. He was not yet qualified. How infuriating. Rules. Spirit Venerable Gui Hai sneered, "You are still alive now because you can't change anything, so you are not worth being dealt with. You can observe for a while longer. Why don't you quickly practice the Tao of inaction and use what is useless? While you haven't stepped into the real battlefield, get out of it as soon as possible." Li Qingshan lowered his head and fell into deep thought. You are already the eldest senior brother of the Myriad Phenomenon sect. With your temperament, cultivation method, and bloodline, as long as you cultivate in peace, it will not be difficult for you to become a human immortal. In the future, you also have a high chance of becoming a true immortal. I know you have gambled many times. Now that you have won everything, it is time to stop. Why waste your good time and endless lifespan? What do you mean by? Li Qingshan raised his head, the real battlefield. Spirit Venerable Gui Hai saw the spirited look in his eyes. Not only did he not feel fear, but he also felt endless yearning. After saying so much, all the punk heard was that. He could not help but say angrily, "You are unteachable." He flicked his sleeves and left. Li Qingshan grabbed his sleeves. "Senior, don't be angry. Listen to me. Those who walk different paths cannot make plans together." Spirit Venerable Gui Hai wanted to struggle free, but Li Qingshan had already grabbed his arm tightly. His present strength was extraordinary. For a moment, Spirit Venerable Gui Hai could not do a thing to him. Li Qingshan said, "Among all living beings, nothing is more important than life. It is truly wise for the Spirit Turtle clan to prioritize preserving their lives. However, I once heard 2 lines of poetry. It's called 'Although a divine turtle has a long life, there is still an end to it. A soaring serpent rides the mist and eventually turns to dust.' No matter how they preserve their lives, it is ultimately impossible for them to live forever. Even the immortals and Buddhas above the 9 heavens can only live a little longer than mortals." Spirit Venerable Gui Hai frowned tightly as he muttered to himself, "Although a divine turtle has a long life, there is still an end to it. A soaring serpent rides the mist and eventually turns to dust." His eyes narrowed as he stared intently at Li Qingshan. "Where did you hear these 2 lines of poetry from?" Sigh, That's not the main point. Li Qingshan was astonished. He had only said it in passing to showcase his knowledge. He never expected Spirit Venerable Gui Hai to be so agitated. Could it be that being a novel lover was just a facade, and he was actually a poetry lover? Spirit Venerable Gui Hai looked deeply at Li Qingshan. You actually know so much. What do I know? Li Qingshan was at a loss as he tried to recite a few more lines. An old steed in the stable, aspiring to great heights. A martyr in his twilight years, aspiring to great heights. However, Spirit Venerable Gui Hai did not react. Although it's a masterpiece, it's quite ordinary. He asked suspiciously, you wrote it? Li Qingshan chuckled and stopped talking about it. What I mean is that although you are wise, you are not a man. Chapter 1527. If that Dragon City flying general could die on the battlefield, he would have no regrets even if he could not be conferred the title of Marquis. However, he eventually lost his way, leaving behind a legacy of regret. To Li Qingshan, what he feared the most was not being able to find the battlefield, letting down that promise and himself. So, if Spirit Venerable wants to scare me with dying a horrible death, then call it beating a dog with meat buns. Pooey. Anyway, that's what I mean. I must go to the ultimate ruins, even if I die. Spirit Venerable Gui Hai was moved, but he quickly regained his deep calmness. Human. He seemed to be silently savoring the word. He suddenly asked, have you heard of Goddess Wa? Li Qingshan asked curiously, Frog Goddess? A toad that became a spirit? Also known as Empress Wa. Spirit Venerable Gui Hai was slightly relieved. If he knew about Nua, he would definitely not say such insulting words. It seemed like those two lines were a coincidence. It was probably a rumor. Demon Toad Emperor? Wait, don't tell me you're talking about Nua. Li Qingshan was very displeased. This old bastard really looked down on him. He had just read a few lousy books. With his cultural background, how could he not have heard of Nua? So you do know. Spirit Venerable Gui Hai's expression was solemn. Li Qingshan was furious. Who doesn't know about Nua mending the heavens? Oh right, there's also Nua creating humans. Spirit Venerable Gui Hai's expression changed. He wanted to cover his mouth, but it was too late. It was earth-shattering. With a loud rumble, a bolt of lightning penetrated Myriad Phenomenon City's defensive array. A corner of the eaves in the middle of the sky collapsed. Boom, boom, boom. More than 10 eaves were destroyed. Many rubble fell on the square. The people who were celebrating the ceremony were in chaos. They were all stunned. Everyone looked up at the sky. What happened? Was there an enemy invasion? But in the entire human world, which sect dared to provoke the Myriad Phenomenon sect? Li Qingshan was dumbfounded. The power of this heavenly lightning was so great that it was simply unheard of. The one that was struck was the eve that was closest to him. This lightning is not going to strike me, is it? He swallowed his saliva and steadied his mind. Create. Shut up. Spirit Venerable Gui Hai's eyes flashed. He had lived for so long, but he had never seen someone who was so good at courting death. Li Qingshan's tongue was frozen, and he didn't manage to say the last word human. No matter how heartless he was, he could sense that he had touched upon something incredible. He even told you about such ancient matters? Spirit Venerable Gui Hai let out a long sigh. This is the greatest secret of the cultivation Tao. Those who speak of it will be punished by the heavens. Fortunately, we're in the mortal realm, and the will of heaven is almost non-existent. If we were in other places, it would be difficult to protect this heaven. Li Qingshan shivered. The sky was the core of the entire Myriad Phenomenon City. In terms of defensive power, even 10 roaring thunder cloud formations stacked together couldn't compare. If the sky was destroyed, he would not be able to escape death. Could this be the legendary shielding phrase? This method of harmonizing was too ruthless. Direct human annihilation. Fortunately, when he was copying novels in the 9 provinces, he didn't randomly make up myths and legends. Generally speaking, only the truth needed to be concealed. He chewed on the ice and whispered, "Are you saying that humans aren't transformed from monkeys?" He hurriedly looked outside. The sky was clear and cloudless. There was no lightning striking down. "What nonsense are you talking about? Humans are born from heaven and earth. How can they be transformed from monkeys? Apes and monkeys?" Because they are the closest to human form, cultivation is the easiest. As long as all different species cultivate well, they will transform into human form. Therefore, humans are the spirit of all living things. Spirit Venerable Gui Hai revealed a trace of unconcealable mockery, as if humans were the spirit of all living things. What was a spirit turtle? What was a phoenix? Li Qingshan came to a realization and slapped his thigh. This is called mainstream values. Yes, mainstream. Then, are there any other shielding phrases? "I'm afraid of me." Li Qingshan was a little flustered and a little angry. He loved to spout nonsense. If he was not allowed to speak nonsense, it would be more painful than death. If lightning suddenly struck down from the sky while he was speaking, he would be too unlucky. Shielding phrases? Spirit Venerable Gui Hai immediately knew what he meant. He said with slight surprise, "You really know how to create phrases. As far as I know, this is the only one. However, some names can't be spoken carelessly. Be careful of your divine eyes." Then I'm relieved. But why? Ever since Li Qingshan transmigrated, he had a doubt. This world and his previous life were linked in countless ways. For example, the 100 schools of thought and the 9 provinces. From the looks of it, the myth of Nuer creating humans was real. He wondered why. Was it really just a dream? He shook his head. He would probably have to go beyond the 9 heavens and meet Brother Ox before he could ask about it. "Hey, I'm asking about the sinkhole. Why are you telling me about Goddess Nuer? The sinkhole was transformed from my race's ancestor, the primordial spirit turtle." Li Qingshan suddenly recalled all the descriptions of Nuer mending the heavens in his previous life. In ancient times, the 4 poles were crippled, the 9 provinces were split, the heavens could not be overturned, the earth could not be contained, the fire scorpion could not be extinguished, the water was vast, the ferocious beasts ate the people, and the raven birds captured the old and the weak. Therefore, Nuer refined the 5-colored stone to mend the heavens, broke her turtles to establish the 4 poles, killed the black dragon to save G province, and accumulated the ashes of the reed to stop. One of the most important steps was to break her turtles to establish the 4 poles. The turtles were the big turtles. Compared to the black dragon, they seemed to be the villains. In the battle of mending the heavens, the soaring serpent turned to ashes and the divine turtle was killed. Nuer turned the turtle shell into the sinkhole to collect all the water in the world. This is the origin of all water to sinkhole. The battle of mending the heavens. Li Qingshan was fascinated. Who did she fight? It can't be that unlucky primordial spirit turtle of yours, right? It sounded like he was not qualified. Spirit Venerable Gui Hai was silent for a moment. This has nothing to do with the sinkhole. Li Qingshan asked curiously, "Aren't the spirit turtles the best at divination and self-preservation? How did they end up like this? Did they miscalculate something? The primordial spirit turtle is different from you humans. It is truly born of the heavens and earth, so its consciousness is immortal. It rejects all foreign objects except for the spirit turtle, especially humans." Li Qingshan said, "So I'm seeking my own death by going to the sinkhole. Since the myth of Nuer creating humans was true, then she was the great mother of humans. No matter how much the flood flowed, it would not hurt her at all. It must have been to save the Zhuan Minute, or the foolish and kind commoners. So it was natural for the primordial spirit turtle to hate humans. He had to take the blame. But the feeling of being viewed as an enemy by a world was probably not good. Yes. Then wouldn't it be fine if I turned into a spirit turtle?" Li Qingshan moved his elbows and imitated a turtle swimming. Spirit Venerable Gui Hai choked. "Your despicable and shameless appearance is indeed worthy of being an elite among humans." Li Qingshan laughed. "Thank you for the compliment. However, you can't hide your human nature in front of the primordial spirit turtle. Maybe I can, maybe I can't, but I have to try. Tell me how to get there, or I'll keep shouting those words until the sky explode. Chapter 1528. Fine, since you want to seek death, I'll fulfill your wish. Spirit Venerable Gui Hai finally mentioned the method to enter the sinkhole, but he did not mention how to exist in the sinkhole. Li Qingshan stopped being arrogant, and listened quietly. He bowed deeply in the end, and said, "Thank you, spiritual master, for helping me." Then he smiled suddenly. "This is such a big chessboard, can I really jump out and escape from it?" He did not have much of a relationship with Spirit Venerable Gui Hai, so why would he waste his breath to persuade him? If he really didn't want him to go to the ultimate, why would he tell him the method? He didn't think he could really threaten a spirit immortal. Who was the person behind Spirit Venerable Gui Hai? The spirit sovereign of the seas was left speechless. Only after quite a while did he say, "The Spirit Turtle Clan is the official historian of the world, so it's obviously impossible for them to remain uninvolved. Heaven and Earth Scribe. To write history for heaven and earth, to write biographies for immortals and Buddhas. Search for all unanswered truths and pass on all forgotten secrets, including those that no one asks about anymore." Li Qingshan widened his eyes as he looked at Spirit Sovereign Gui Hai in amazement. This was the first time he had seen something proud on that indifferent face. Is this why the Spirit Turtle Clan exists? Meaning? No, those are the lowly thoughts of humans. As we are not a creation of nature, we are born without meaning. That's why we desperately seek meaning. Therefore, you are not a spirit turtle. Spirit Sovereign Gui Hai slowly pressed his hand to his chest. This is our nature. Li Qingshan came to a sudden realization. Inferring these innate gods from a human's point of view was really wrong. They were born with knowledge and temperament, and they would never be confused by their own definition. Therefore, there was no need to seek any meaning, nor was there a need to make a choice among the many meanings. All one had to do was follow the trajectory of fate and naturally go from life to death. Of course, there would be less struggle and pain. This was such a fortunate thing. In comparison, not only were humans lacking in strength, but they were also almost mentally disabled. Although ordinary demons did not have such a powerful bloodline inheritance, it was a carnate item. Therefore, there wouldn't be any messy inner demons. It was nothing more than hunting and escaping, strength and weakness, survival and death. Only humans, these little monsters made out of mud by Goddess Nua. Only an inferior figurine made out of interest would be so weak. Li Qingshan bowed deeply again. "Thank you, Senior. I was even more convinced of my idea that no one lived for the sake of living. Goddess Nua didn't give humans any meaning to live. Perhaps she wanted us to find it ourselves." He turned around and left. The spirit sovereign of the seas Gui Hai watched Li Qingshan's figure disappear into the distance. He suddenly stopped, nodded his head and said with a smile, "Oh right, please leave enough space for me in the history of heaven and earth. Otherwise, don't blame me for not reminding you. Ha ha ha." He laughed and went downstairs, chanting in a slow voice, "Once the bitter encounter begins, the stars fall from the battlefield. Shattering mountains and rivers? Shattering mountains and rivers? Forget it. Who hasn't died since ancient times? Leaving behind a loyal heart that shines in the pages of history. Good poem, good poem." Spirit Venerable Guihai's heart trembled. Let's fight to the death. He did not read the sorrow and hatred of the original poem. Instead, he read a murderous aura. Buddhists used Buddha's words as sutras. It was comparable to his cultivation technique. And there were only two kinds of stars. One was the trichiliocosm, and the other was the 9 heavens immortals and Buddhas. The poem could express one's will, whether it was intentional or not. Time passed, the full moon waned. Life was like a mayfly in the boundless sea. Looking down from high in the sky, one could see through the thick thunderclouds. Across the turbulent sea surface, a mayfly slowly swam in the deep sea. But if one were to personally enter the deep sea, one would be shocked to discover that the mayfly was 100,000 feet long. It was shaped like a salamander and had feather patterns on its body. With a flick of its long tail, it suddenly leaped out of the water and swallowed the lobster demon king that was transcending the tribulation. Then, it soared into the sea. It stirred up huge waves. The tribulation lightning that filled the sky came crashing down. Most of it was attracted by the human-shaped lightning rod on its head. The rest only left faint marks on its massive body. The thunderclouds in the sky quickly dissipated. The human-shaped lightning rod asked, "Was it delicious?" "Extremely delicious. Why didn't you leave some for me? You're just a clone, what's the point of eating it? Can't I have a taste?" This was one of the 6 paths of reincarnation, the monster-beast path, also known as the animal path. The sky was high and the sea was wide. The mountains were deep and the forests were dense. It was the paradise of all monsters. A paradise where the strong preyed on the weak and the fittest survived. The endless hunt and escape, survival and death, formed the ultimate melody of freedom and freedom, thousands of beasts without restraint. Apart from natural communities and loose alliances, there were no human cities or cultivation sects. It wasn't just because of the differences in species and the fact that their intelligence was generally lower than humans. The great demons with extremely high spiritual intelligence were also more inclined to dominate an area. This was the will of the monster-beast path. It followed the nature of all living things. If anyone tried to establish a big alliance here, they would quickly find that their cultivation level couldn't advance, and their luck would become worse and worse. Even for a sect as loose as the Wanxiang sect, there was already strict discipline here. Thus, there was no guarantee of safety. Even a monster king that was about to transcend the tribulation could only obediently accept his fate if he encountered a powerful hunter. As a result, many monsters chose to cooperate with humans and become mounts, breaking away from this overly free environment. A disciple of the myriad phenomenon sect would never be swallowed by a monster during his tribulation. This was the benefit of having an organization. However, there were also many human cultivators who did the opposite. They were willing to risk being hunted and return to the beautiful nature. For example, this mayfly monster. Li Qingshan spread his arms and took a deep breath. The splashing waves landed on his cheeks along with the sea breeze. "Ah, how beautiful." He patted the big kuan beneath him. "Yangying, do you suddenly feel the urge to mate?" "Sure. Come." Jiyu Yangying's eyes swiveled as she smiled. She swayed her tail gently and went deep into the sea. Li Qingshan sized up her mountain-like body and asked, "Can you transform into a human?" "I can't," Jiyu Yangying answered straightforwardly. "Then forget it." Li Qingshan also gave up immediately. Jiyu Yangying asked, "Just what are you doing here?" "Inspecting work and experiencing life." "Are you done inspecting?" Li Qingshan nodded. "Yes, I'm relieved to see that you're so free." After all these years of cultivation, Jiyu Yangying had undergone 5 heavenly tribulations. Although her bloodline was half human and half demon, she still had the heart of an eagle and pursued endless freedom. Especially after fusing with the feathers of chaotic heaven, she completely abandoned her human bloodline and became a natural deity, the Kuanpeng, similar to the spirit turtle and phoenix. Out of all the races, she was probably the most compatible with the demonic path. There was no need to seek any meaning. Freedom was fate, and fate was freedom. Freedom was born, and freedom was death. Even Li Qingshan was rather envious. If his main body came to the demonic path, he could probably become a child of destiny, but he definitely could not compare to her. Moreover, that kind of destiny was instead a kind of restraint for him. That was because in the hearts of people, there would always be a battle between gods and demons. Whether it was the ox demon's stubbornness, the tiger demon's fury, the phoenix's pride, the spirit turtle's schemes, or the Chiline's benevolence, they were all an obstacle to freedom. Only the ape demon's heart was closest to freedom, but it was too close to obsession. He had read all the heavens in the heavenly court. There was only the heavens of freedom and the heavens of nature, but not a single heavens of freedom. This was a congenital deficiency that could not be made up for later. He also yearned for freedom, but it was not just for freedom. But it did not matter. It was not bad to see her obtain freedom. Li Qingshan smiled. "I hope to see your heroic rise to the top soon. I won't be too far behind you." Li Qingshan stretched. His figure melted into the sea current, like the moon in the water. Although the vastness of the ocean here far surpassed the human realm, it was still different from Ruin's End. Ruin's End was not an ocean, so it was probably useless no matter how much he experienced it. In the blink of an eye, a blood-red sky and a blood-red land unfolded before his eyes. Luo Hu Xiaoming held a huge sword that he had picked up casually and stood on the corpse-strewn battlefield. He looked at him and asked the same question, "What are you doing here?" Li Qingshan said in grief and indignation, "Is there no one to welcome me? I was the one who helped you deal with the teleportation formation after all." Luo Hu Xiaoming threw down the huge sword. "Heh, if your main body came here, I would be able to properly welcome you. Heh, aren't you afraid that your mom will call your house for dinner?" Chapter 1529. Luo Hu Xiaoming's face darkened. His expression was ferocious, but he had the majesty of a deity. He was not the so-called child of destiny. He was originally from the Azura celestial tribe, and he shared the same fate as the Azura path. Ever since he returned to the Azura path, his power had been increasing day by day. He only needed time to return to his godhood. However, even a deity had a reverse scale. He suddenly struck out with his palm, and the boulder Li Qingshan was sitting on exploded. A cloud of dust rose into the sky. "There is no mother and son on the battlefield." His voice was resolute, but it sounded tired. "This is your inner demon. If you don't get rid of it, you may not have the chance to reunite with her on the battlefield." Li Qingshan's voice came from the dust. The first few heavenly tribulations did not pose any threat to Luo Hu Xiaoming. However, the closer he got to the position of a deity, the more dangerous the situation became. The tribulation thunder and demon barrier did not know any acquaintances. The stronger one was, the greater the test one had to endure. Any flaw in one's heart could be exploited by the demon, and the result would be devastating. Luo Hu Xiaoming's ferocious expression returned to normal, and a hint of sadness appeared on his face. "That is also my fate." Li Qingshan's heart skipped a beat. "Oh right, have you heard of Nua?" "Nua?" Luo Hu Xiaoming frowned. "Who is that?" Li Qingshan felt even more deeply that this was indeed a big secret. Even the former deities did not know of Nua. "Then have you heard of the Battle of Patching the Heavens?" "I have." Luo Hu Xiaoming pointed at his head. In the Rahu clan's inherited memory, it is the oldest battle. However, it was too long ago. At that time, even the 6 paths of reincarnation did not exist. It is only a legend that cannot be verified. If the Nua you speak of really exists, where is she now? What if the legend is true? How do you know? Luo Hu Xiaoming asked curiously. "You are a country bumpkin. How do you know such ancient things? Don't tell me you made it up." Li Qingshan pointed at his head. "Memory inheritance." Luo Hu Xiaoming smiled and crossed his arms. "Remember, you were just a mortal." Li Qingshan opened his arms. How many people in the Azura realm were originally mortals? Except for Rahu and Jidu, all of them. Where did Rahu and Jidu come from? This should be a branch of the ancient god fiends. Where did the ancient fiend god come from? Naturally, it was born of the heavens and earth. Gods and demons are also humans, and humans are not born from heaven and earth. When the heavens and earth were born, everything was so new, and many things had no names, and it was necessary to point at them. The concepts of gods, demons, and humans did not exist at all. They were all just a figment of the imagination of later generations. These ancient memories. Probably only the Spirit Turtle clan possessed the legacy, and only Ruin's End could preserve it. When Nua created humans, she did not use any gods or demons as a template. However, when she first created the human, she was very excited and meticulously molded it with yellow mud. Later, she found it troublesome. So she covered the mud with withered vines and casually sprinkled them into mud spots. What was molded from the yellow mud was the so-called god. What was sprinkled from the mud was the so-called human. The two were essentially no different. Powerful leaders led the tribe and overcame the thorns on the earth to reproduce. These were all historical stories that he had obtained from spirit sovereign Gui Hai over the years by using the novels contributed by the Five Continents world. It made his understanding of the 9 transformations of demons and gods deeper, and his cultivation also increased. At this level, knowledge was power. What nonsense are you talking about? Luo Hu Xiaoming raised his eyebrows, finding it unbelievable. The Rahu clan was a carnate god. Even ordinary Azura could not be compared to them, so how could they coexist with humans? Li Qingshan said, "This is the historical records of the spirit turtle clan. Even if what you said is true, where did that person come from?" Li Qingshan grabbed a handful of mud with his left hand and pinched a small person. "This is you." He also grabbed a handful of mud with his right hand and sprinkled it, turning it into a small person on the ground. He casually picked one up. "This is me." Luo Hu Xiaoming took a look. The 2 small people were abnormally ugly. They only had a blurry human shape, but his was barely considered exquisite. "You mean that newer created?" Li Qingshan hurriedly interrupted. "Shut up. Don't speak nonsense. You will be struck by lightning." Luo Hu Xiaoming smiled and said, "This story of yours is too ridiculous. If it was in the heavenly Tao, it would be enough for them to execute you 100 times. Humans were the spirit of all living things. Celestials were naturally superior to humans, spirits among spirits. Now, it was said that they were not born of heaven and earth, but puppet-like creations. They were even inferior to ordinary birds and beasts, so how could those arrogant celestials stand it?" Li Qingshan said seriously, "Then do you know why Nuer perished in my inherited memories? Why? In order to save the common people, these lowly and pitiful creations. There are gods and demons." Li Qingshan crushed the 2 clay figurines together and scattered them with the wind. Dust to dust, dirt to dirt. This was not what Spirit Venerable Gui Hai had told him, but the outcome of the heaven-mending battle in his previous life's memories. In the blood-red clouds on the horizon, there was a radiant sun, like a flowing golden ball wrapped in ancient lava. On the other side, there was a cold and white moon like pig iron. However, it was unknown who went down and who came up. At that moment, Yi Yi's body, which had exhausted all its strength, lay down in the middle and stopped breathing. This was the record of a novelist in his previous life. This was probably something that the primordial spirit turtle had not expected. No matter how magical and profound its divination abilities were, it could not have predicted that the Great Mother, who coexisted with heaven and earth, would be willing to sacrifice herself for these puppets made of mud. Therefore, it could not escape the fate of being killed by her. Li Qingshan's expression was a little sad. "Isn't it a matter of course for the mother of mankind to sacrifice herself for mankind?" Luo Hu Xiaoming pondered for a long time, then cupped his fists and bowed. "I understand." He smiled brightly, sweeping away the haze between his brows. "From today onwards, Nuer is my mother. As for those meaningless fetters, I will personally cut them off." Once the knot in his heart was removed, his breath showed signs of breaking through in an instant, but he gently suppressed it. Li Qingshan bowed slightly. "This is what I should do." After the training of the great demon king, one of the 4 heavenly kings, Xiaoming Heavenly King, finally made up his mind to kill his own mother. "What a terrifying story," Luo Hu Xiaoming said again. "By the way, I want you to know that I am not worried about being discovered. Deities are not omniscient or omnipotent. But as far as I know, all deities have an almost instinctive prophecy ability." Li Qingshan did not hate to fight as a chess piece, but if whatever he did was within the expectations of those deities, it would be too bad. Theoretically, yes, but in reality, it is impossible. Firstly, it is hard to predict a person's mind. When the number reaches billions, it will become a huge variable. Secondly, how can a deity guess the thoughts of another deity? When their thoughts diverge, their fates start to become chaotic, and they cannot ignore each other's existence, even if they are at the ends of the earth. The greater the divergence, the deeper the chaos, and it becomes a mess. "I see, then I am relieved. I have been burned by the karmic fire, and it is already a new beginning. My bloodline has been severed, and my fate has been completely changed. But the reason why I dare to come back is actually because of you. Me. You should know that you are entangled with a chaotic and changeable fate. You are born from the calamity, and I suspect that even the Buddha cannot completely grasp it. Now that I am facing the calamity with you, who can control my whereabouts? Haha, I understand now, so it is because of my own interference. By the way, what calamity? Heaven and earth killing calamity? What do you mean? I don't know, it has always been called that. All right. Chapter 1530. Li Qingshan also asked about Spirit Venerable Gui Hai, but that old bastard refused to answer no matter what. After spending so many years together, they could be said to be on friendly terms. Li Qingshan was too embarrassed to threaten him again. Of course, the main reason was that threats were useless. The answer to the question had to be found by oneself. When can you go through the sixth tribulation? Soon. After breaking the knot in his heart, Luo Hu Xiaoming became even more spirited. Looking at the Azura path, this was his territory, his home. He opened his fingers and grabbed into the distance, then suddenly clenched. I will take back what I lost. Fight, little Ming. Li Qingshan raised his arms and shouted. Luo Hu Xiaoming sighed, feeling that something was wrong. Can you call me Ming? How much do you like the word little? Ming. How can you think of that? What kind of third-rate romance is this? Haha. Li Qingshan laughed at his taste. Luo Hu Xiaoming gritted his teeth. Then call me Luo Xiaoming. Okay, little Ming. Goodbye little Ming. Without saying anything, Luo Hu Xiaoming slashed with his palm. With a loud bang, a deep ravine appeared on the ground, but it hit nothing. Li Qingshan's figure gradually faded, like the moon in the water. He smiled and waved his hand. I won't play with you anymore, I have to focus on the war. Tell me if you need help. No need, it's just some boring small battles. I'm afraid you'll be bored. Li Qingshan closed his eyes, then opened them. Under a pale crescent moon, a mountain stood tall, a lonely city seemed to pierce through the sky. The war had lasted for half the night, and the enemy was still stubbornly resisting. But this was not the battlefield of the demon realm. Since the battle with Dao Wu, Black Cloud City had entered an unprecedented peace. The monks of the Pure Land School had pushed the Pure Land of the mortal realm to Coldblood Pass, without a single guard. If they wanted to advance, they could completely occupy Coldblood Pass and replace Black Cloud City. But after thinking about it, he decided to give up on the idea. The human realm had always focused on defense against the infernal realm. Under such circumstances, they gave up on the more dangerous Black Cloud City. Venturing deep into the infernal domain's borders was not a good thing. After all, the bird that sticks out will be shot. Thus, he ordered his soldiers to attack Lungshua Pass and the canyon behind. They carried out the most thorough destruction, as much as possible to block the possibility of the infernal domain attacking. As he had hoped, the infernal domain had been peaceful for many years and seemed to have completely given up on attacking this area. He suspected that something had played a role in it, perhaps Chengqi. Unknowingly, he had already formed a grudge with the two gods. He was still alive and kicking. He had been dreaming of a river of blood lately. It meandered for tens of thousands of miles, as if it had passed through time, flowing all the way from the primordial era to the present. Legend has it that the river Styx was the first river at the beginning of the world. Its flow defined time and formed fate. Even a god would not be able to renege on an oath made to it. Every time he dreamt, he would get closer to it. Recently, he could already see the tumbling waves of the river of blood. Thus, he understood that on the day of the final battle with Chengqi, it was getting closer and closer. The trip to the infernal domain was a must. Many people envied him for his stable life as the eldest apprentice brother, but they did not know that war had never changed. The aura of death filled the world. A deep sense of hunger was like a hole or a ball of fire. He could not help but lick his lips. Little and handed over her tender arm. Do you want to eat? Just now, someone asked me what was the point of having a clone eat. My little and is still the most considerate. Sigh, I'm so hungry. The wind whistled past his ears. A huge dragon flew in the sky. This was the dragon corpse left behind by the previous eldest apprentice brother Lin Xian. After being purified by the 3 burial robe, it had been reactivated. Its golden scales had faded into a silvery white color, and under the moonlight, it was like a silver ribbon. Li Qingshan held little and in his arms and stood on the dragon's head. The night wind blew against his face between the dragon's horns. There were millions of corpse soldiers and ghost soldiers below. They were like mountains and seas as they attacked the city in waves. More than 10 corpse emperors and ghost emperors were gathered in the crumbling city, discussing countermeasures in panic. They were originally the rulers of this land, and in order to avoid killing each other, they each had their own territory. But now, they had no choice but to gather together to resist the powerful enemy. Because in this area, all the corpse emperors and ghost emperors who did not do so had either died or defected to the enemy. In their view, there was no difference between the two, and the latter was even worse. But now, they suddenly discovered that it was useless even if they joined forces. The corpse ghost army under their command was far larger than the enemy, but under the waves of attacks, they could not withstand a single blow and were already on the verge of collapse. A corpse emperor roared, "Impossible! How can low-level corpse ghosts have such discipline? Unless they invaded other worlds, the hungry ghost realm rarely had large-scale wars. Occasionally, there would be a few, but they were basically all swarms, like a group fight. Because undead were different from living beings, they were innately unsuited for war. Corpses moved slowly and had low intelligence, while ghosts moved erratically and had chaotic minds. They were basically a bunch of mentally handicapped and mentally ill people. Under the drive of hunger, they only had a strong desire to devour. The corpse emperors and ghost emperors could use their corpse control techniques and ghost controlling techniques to use them as cannon fodder, but they were unable to organize them into a true army. And now, these corpse ghosts attacking the city were completely disciplined and obeyed all orders. The most inconceivable thing was that they could actually condense military chi. Ordinary corpse ghost armies could also gather their chi to strengthen their commander. It looked a little similar to military chi, but it was essentially just yin chi. It was already very difficult to restrain the corpse ghosts' desire to devour each other. It was simply wishful thinking to want them to unite and gather military chi. But this kind of impossible thing was happening right in front of their eyes. The mountain of corpses and the sea of ghosts continued to approach. Li Qingshan shook his head. TCH, these guys don't understand the art of war at all. His crimson eyes shone brightly in the darkness, demonic and full of deterrence. The raw tiger demonic eyes was one of the tiger demon's divine abilities. It could intimidate opponents in battle, but it was basically useless against extremely powerful enemies. This somewhat useless innate divine ability had played a very miraculous role in the war against the hungry ghost realm. This was because it could intimidate weak existences, distort and solidify their minds, and cause them to completely submit to the tiger demon, turning them into hungry ghosts. Low-level corpse ghosts had low intelligence and chaotic minds, so it was very easy for them to turn into hungry ghosts. This was completely different from the corpse control techniques and ghost controlling techniques. Hungry ghosts didn't need to be controlled, and they could wholeheartedly serve the tiger demon. In an instant, they became the most loyal and brave soldiers. Their minds were no longer paralyzed, and their minds were no longer chaotic. They sacrificed themselves for the greater good, wholeheartedly serving the tiger demon. Li Qingshan cracked his neck. "It's time to give them the final blow." A ghost emperor shouted, "Don't you know whose subordinates we are?" Chapter 1531. Li Qingshan shrugged disapprovingly. Little and smiled faintly. He was not the child of destiny of the hungry ghost realm. Instead, his luck here was extremely bad, and he could be called the child of misfortune. If they hadn't done a thorough investigation, why would they have started a war? From the moment he opened the gate of hungry ghosts to the very beginning, he was almost discovered by ghost immortals and corpse immortals passing by. Perhaps it was because of the white bone bodhisattva, but it was more likely that the white bone path of great beauty was fighting with the hungry ghost path for food. Being burned by the samdi flames of Whitebone was different from being devoured by other ghouls. Instead, it was being completely purified. Even the weak wills of ordinary small worlds had instincts to maintain their own existence. The ascension heavenly tribulation would become extremely difficult, not to mention the hungry ghost path which focused on hunger and devouring. It had always been the one eating others. There was no reason for others to eat it. Therefore, making a living in the hungry ghost realm was truly not an easy task. Even though Little Anne had already digested the results of the battle in the fiend realm and had undergone 5 heavenly tribulations, it was still impossible for him to fight Ghost Immortal and Corpse Immortal head-on. In the entire 6 paths of reincarnation, Ghost Immortals and Corpse Immortals were the ones who had survived 6 heavenly tribulations. Their numbers were even higher than the sum of the other Taos. The 6th heavenly tribulation was a threshold. Many human immortals and Yarrow immortals would choose to traverse the 9 heavens in order to increase their chances of becoming a true immortal. More importantly, be it human immortals or Yarrow immortals, their lifespans were limited. The Book of Life and Death recorded their lives. If he could not overcome 7 heavenly tribulations to become a true immortal, he would have to die. In that case, he would have to make a trip to the Yama Palace and be obedient and reincarnate. Although there would be certain preferential treatment, such as not having to drink the water of the river of forgetfulness and forgetting the memories of their previous lives, it was said that they could even bargain with the 10 kings of hell and choose the environment in which they reincarnated, be it the aristocracy or the royal family, or even human or beast, male or female. However, recultivating was destined to be an extremely dangerous thing. The amount of information a baby could carry was limited, and it was impossible to inject all of his memories into it, let alone an unformed fetus. She would definitely have to go through the mystery of the womb. She had no means of protecting herself at all. Even if he was a member of the royal family, he was no match for a cup of poisoned wine. If he was not careful, he would die in the womb. No matter how many backup plans he had prepared, he would not be able to overcome all the dangers. After getting through the mystery in the womb, there was still a question in front of her. Are you still you? Now, Li Qingshan clearly understood that the Chu Tian he saw all those years ago, even if it was the Chu Tian who had awakened his memories, it was impossible for him to be the real Lin Xian. This was because the original eldest senior brother Lin Xian had a young spirit cultivation, and a foundation establishment cultivator could not carry his lifetime of memories. At most, he could only retain some memory fragments, and the main content was still a few scrolls. He was not a weaker version of Lin Xian, but rather a stronger version of Chu Tian. In the end, he was afraid of losing face because of his resentment. He had walked into a land of death. As for the senior martial brother of the Myriad Nature sect, who oversaw Black Cloud City and killed a demon emperor, he was definitely not someone like that. In this sense, you only have one life. If one did not become a true immortal, one would eventually turn to dust. Therefore, countless human immortals and demon immortals rejected the wheel of reincarnation. There were only 2 paths they could take. One was to join the fiendish domain and become an evil god. The other was to enter the hungry ghost realm and become a ghost immortal or corpse immortal. And to become an evil god, they had to distort their nature, and they had to be commanded by the 12 demon gods to conquer the human realm and fight against the desireless heavenly palace. If they were not careful, they would be killed by a true immortal and be doomed eternally. The hungry ghost realm became the best choice, which led to the current situation. But for Li Qingshan and Little Anne, this was the biggest benefit. Aside from ghost immortals and corpse immortals, they were the top hunters. Ordinary corpse emperors and ghost emperors could be eaten like vegetables. Even 10 of them together would not be a match for them. And the hungry ghost realm was extremely vast, no matter how many ghost immortals and corpse immortals there were. It could not be that ghost immortals were everywhere and corpse immortals were as numerous as dogs, or that they each ruled over a region and had their own sphere of influence. In the end, the hungry ghost realm only had a will and no consciousness. It could not directly tell a certain ghost immortal, "There's a white-bone successor hiding here. Go kill her for me." At most, it could make him suddenly want to go out for a walk, and there had to be a sufficient reason. There is no door to fortune or misfortune, only man brings it. Whether it was good or bad luck, it could only be triggered by some kind of opportunity. It was born from within and felt from without. And up until now, Little An had not used the Samdi flames of white bone. It was to prevent this kind of opportunity. Otherwise, it would be much easier to break through Wuhua City. She had to do her best to avoid conflict with any ghost immortals or corpse immortals. Once everyone knew about it, all her previous efforts would be wasted. But fortunately, as long as she lay down in the pile of bones, she would be no different from an ordinary set of white bones. Even ghost immortals and corpse immortals would not be able to detect her. She and Li Qingshan had gone through a detailed social investigation and gained a full understanding of the hungry ghost realm. They made a lot of preparations before choosing this Wuhua ghost immortals territory to start building a base. That old ghost had a good habit. It slept for 100 years and was awake for 100 years. For an existence that was close to eternal life, time had little meaning. Even cultivation was meaningless. No one could become a true immortal in the hungry ghost realm. Perhaps there had been, but how could the order of the 6 paths of reincarnation be blasphemed? The 9 heavens were not that kind. Such a heaven-defying action would definitely incur the wrath of the heavens. Therefore, there was only one word to describe it. Many ghost immortals and corpse immortals had the habit of sleeping, similar to mortals. They used sleep to rest and recover, thereby reducing their consumption and maintaining their own existence. It also prevented them from falling into madness in the endless emptiness. This old ghost only slept with a special pattern. Although this city was called Wuhua City, the Wuhua ghost immortal's sleeping place was not here. It would only come when he was awake. Therefore, no matter how happy these ghost emperors and corpse emperors were, Li Qingshan was not afraid at all. Little An had sent skeleton demons to monitor the Wuhua ghost immortal's sleeping place. Once the situation changed, he could hide himself or retreat from the human realm in time. One of the ghost emperors pretended to be confused and asked, "If you are so good at fighting, why don't you fight in the Azura realm? Why must you come here to make things difficult for us?" At the same time, he transmitted his thoughts to the other ghost emperors and corpse emperors. "I'll buy some time. Who will sound the alarm and wake up the Wuhua ghost immortal?" The ghost emperors and corpse emperors looked at each other. The Wuhua ghost immortal hated being woken up from his slumber the most. Moreover, every time he woke up, it would be when he was the most hungry. The entire realm has fallen, and the Wuhua city is about to be breached. I'm sure he can understand. The alarm was set in the deepest part of the Wuhua city, and it only needed to be pressed lightly. It would be able to sound the alarm and wake the Wuhua ghost immortal. However, they looked at each other. None of them had the intention to do so. They felt that the possibility of dying like this was much higher than the city being breached. It was better for them to scatter like birds and beasts when the city was breached and flee to other places. Li Qingshan laughed. "Can't you see? I'm recruiting soldiers and preparing for a big battle. Stop stalling for time. If anyone dared to wake that old ghost, they would have done so long ago." He leaped up. He descended from the sky and landed on the Wuhua city. Millions of corpse emperors looked up at him at the same time. The cold, lifeless military chi gathered on his body. His cheeks became much more sunken, and the blood on his lips faded. His skin became pale, and his bones were faintly visible. Only his eyes were still crimson like fire. Even if it was just a mirror clone. In an instant, it possessed destructive power that was no weaker than the main body. A deathly grey meteor broke through the formation and landed in the middle of the ghost emperors and corpse emperors. A death military god stood up. Boom! A wave of air spread out, and the strong wind and deathly chi swept past. Every ghost emperor and corpse emperor could not stand steadily, and their expressions changed. They had never seen such an existence in the hungry ghost realm. They did not even dare to run away, let alone attack him. The violent military chi was so strong that it was hard to control. The body of the death military god rose like fire, but it was the color of deathly gray. The death military god looked down at the ghost emperors and corpse emperors. "Submit to me, or die." "Oh, I forgot. You guys are dead to begin with." Ha 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 ha. No one could laugh. They only felt cold all over. You really have no sense of humor. My time is limited. 1, 2, 3. The death military god slowly raised his huge palm. I'm willing to submit to you, my lord. Me too. I'm willing to follow you to conquer the world. Very well. Li Qingshan was not surprised at all. This was not the first time he had seen such a scene. The ghost emperors and corpse emperors clearly did not have the virtue of loyalty. To them, survival was the most important thing. How ironic. At this moment, the azure dragon flew over. Its sharp claws gripped the mountain rocks and coiled around Wuhua City. Little and sat cross-legged on the dragon's head. He was wearing a kasaya and chanting with his eyes closed. The corpse emperors and ghost emperors under Li Qingshan's command also surrounded them, sealing off all the exits. The kasaya on Little An's body floated up like a white bird, wrapping around a corpse emperor. Li Qingshan's nightmare tiger eyes could only intimidate opponents of this level for a while, but Little An's 3-burial robe was best at purifying these dead ghosts. This was how he got his army of ghouls. Otherwise, it would be meaningless to only get the loyalty of the low-level ghouls. Without the leadership of various generals, it was impossible to gather the morale of the army. The corpse emperor's expression was ferocious, and he wanted to resist. Li Qingshan glanced at him. You can choose to die. Although the corpse emperor did not understand what die meant, he did not dare to resist under the gaze of the huge and terrifying death military god. He obediently wrapped himself in the kasaya. His expression changed. Sometimes he gritted his teeth, and sometimes he struggled angrily. However, his expression gradually calmed down as if all the pain had disappeared. Even the hunger that deeply tortured him disappeared completely. He became satisfied, serene, and comfortable. When he took off his kasaya, he turned his head and looked at his colleagues who had always wanted to devour him. He seemed to have changed into a different person, and there was a trace of pity on his face. Believe me, you must give it a try. Hiss. The corpse emperors and ghost emperors all sucked in a breath of cold air at the same time. They felt an unprecedented fear. However, their fear soon disappeared, and they became serene, calm, and compassionate. Only the last ghost emperor was left. He looked at Little and in shock. Are you the white bone inheritor? Little and opened one eye and put a finger to his lips. Sure. P.S. Sorry to keep everyone waiting again. I received some feedback some time ago, and I felt that these few chapters were not very clear, so I reconsidered the writing style and rhythm. Although I have my own reasons for showing off, I wrote it for others to read, so I spent some time to adjust it. It would be good if everyone was happy. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.